We're waiting. Okay, yeah, Chris has activated the live stream.
Cool.
And then, yeah, I guess we can wait a couple more minutes and then I'll start the recording and we can begin.
For sure. And I know, Rosemary, you did do the practice this morning, correct?
No, I was not there.
You were not. Okay, got it. And I don't believe Ella, Nathan, and who else just joined? Elena?
Yeah, where did you get the tree painting tapestry?
The tapestry, my dad gave it to me.
It's very nice.
It's man, this is one of those that has lasted me so long. And it's such a good one. So it's huge actually. But yeah, thank you. And I did a lot.
I had this idea like we should have similar kind of tapestries to go behind Buddha statues or other kind of statues.
Oh, yeah. And it's hard now to me to find like it's a good, almost it feels like a linen, this tapestry. And we just ordered one for the bedroom, and it's very synthetic feeling. I find it harder to get these kind anymore, but they're very handy tapestries.
Yeah. Many purposes.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and start now.
Okay, I'll start the recording.
Sure.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is Taylor Bell, and she is going to be leading us in a posture practice, a 20-minute chair practice.
Yes. So yes, hi again. My name is Taylor, and I'm here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I've taught yoga for over 14 years, and though I'm calling this postural practice because that's what we're going to be focusing on, is just postures. What's interesting is I've actually taught at a detox facility here in town for many years. And what I found fascinating is how adaptable the yoga asanas, the yoga postures are to all these different environments. So for instance, in the detox facilities, everybody's in a chair, and people tend to be very blown away by what is accessible and what can be done simply by sitting in a chair and taking intentional movement. And it's really cool too, because this is parlaying into my work with end-of-life companionship and offering posture practice in the chair that way, or even laying down. It's very adaptable. And so the intention here for this little segment is just to bring awareness to sensation and your breathing. And you might notice that I use a bit of what we call invitational language, which is part of having a more, shall we say, trauma-informed experience. Not to suggest that everybody here on the call has that, in their past, but that's how I tend to offer it, so that everybody knows this isn't meant to be performative. There's nothing to necessarily achieve. It really is all invitational to see what works for you, that gets you to the experience of feeling, again, physical sensation and getting in touch with your breath. So that's the preface. So to begin, just simply sitting in your chair. I would suggest sitting at the edge of your chair so your feet can be firmly planted on the floor. And then you can rest your hands wherever is comfortable for you. And also, if it's comfortable for you to close your eyes, please go ahead. If you prefer to keep your eyes open, I just suggest looking down towards the floor so you aren't distracted by anything else. And just take a few deep breaths in and out. Just let your breath now find a natural rhythm. As you see if you can sit upright anymore, like lengthen your spine anymore. While you're finding that, also allowing your shoulders to relax down. If you notice that you're clenching your teeth, relax your jaw. Even allowing the muscles in your face, around your mouth, your eyes, eyebrows, relax. Just let yourself kind of like drop in. As you keep your shoulders nice and relaxed, and you can keep your eyes closed. You bring your right ear to your right shoulder. And just see if you can find a stretch in the left side of your neck. You might find it immediately when you bring your ear toward your shoulder. Another thing you could do is just gently rock your head a little forward and backward to see if that gives you more access to a stretch in the left side of your neck. From here, you can let your chin drop down to your chest. Notice the sensation might move more toward the back of your neck. And now right ear to right shoulder, whichever side you didn't already do. How can you find the stretch on this side of your neck? So once again, you might be stationary, just allowing your ear to drop toward your shoulder, or you might, very small movement, shift your head forward and backward slightly. And you can always linger if you find somewhere, shall we say, interesting. Let things just release, allow the stretch to happen. And then you can bring your head upright, and if your eyes are closed, you can open them now. Now just take your right hand out in front of you and make a fist. And you're going to slowly roll your wrist one way. And slow movement is where it's at for me, because that's where you can notice more. So, when we move fast, it's hard to be aware. And so just slowly rolling one way. And then roll your wrist the other way. You might hear little pops and cracks as you do this. And now open your hand wide. Take your other hand and gently pull the fingers of your right hand back to stretch your palm and the underside of your forearm. Also notice how your breathing is going, because a lot of times we tend to hold our breath, whether it's because we're thinking about things or the stretch is intense. So I'll just keep reminding you to keep breathing throughout. Now switch it to point your same side hand, point your fingers down. Once again, take your other hand and pull your fingers towards you and see if you can find a stretch in the top of your wrist, top of your forearm. And now take your right arm just across your chest. You can hold onto your arm with your hand, pull your arm across, getting a stretch up through your upper arm, your shoulder. Take a really full breath in. Exhale, let your arm drop down, shake it off. Okay. Exact same thing, other side. So start with making a fist. with your left hand and slowly rolling your wrist one way. Again, just noticing sensations you feel in your wrist, your arm, or somewhere entirely different. It's fine. No sensation is unwelcome. And then switching to rolling your wrist the other way. Now open your hand wide. Take your other hand, gently pull your fingers back towards you. Kind of stretching your palm and or underside of your forearm. And now point your fingers down. Once again, take your other hand, gently pull your fingers toward you. Stretch the top side of your forearm and wrist. Take your arm across your chest. Stretching up to your left shoulder. Full breath in. And let your arm down. Shake it off. Okay, so the same idea with your ankles. So you're going to lift your right leg up and you can hold the front of your knee or the back of your knee, whatever you can hold on to. And then just circle your right foot one direction. And the other direction. And now point and flex your foot. So you feel this, on the front of your ankle when you point, back of your ankle when you flex. And then set your foot down and just switch it out, starting with rolling your foot one way, or really rolling your ankle. And roll the other way. Notice your breathing, that you hopefully are breathing, but also breathing a little fuller maybe than you normally do, because breathing fully is calming to our nervous system. That's a good thing. And then point and flex your foot. Notice where you feel that, what do you feel when you do different things. And then set your foot down. Okay, so those are just some like preliminary stretches just to kind of open from the outside in, right, from our extremities in. So now we'll do some variations on more traditional yoga postures. So still sitting at the edge of your chair, if you'll take your feet out however wide is comfortable for you. And from here, you'll take your right forearm to your right thigh and reach your left arm up. Yeah. Immediately just noticing what you feel when you do this. And you can press your forearm into your thigh to kind of help lift out of your right shoulder and reach higher through your top arm. And from here, you can add in reaching your top arm over your ear so you get a stretch through your left side. Yeah, nice, Rosemary. Okay, just, some fuller breaths as you hold this shape. And noticing where the sensations are and kind of what their quality is like. Take one more breath here. And then you'll come up and switch it out. So left forearm down to your left thigh, right arm up. And as soon as you come into the shape, you might notice a difference on this side, whether it's because of what side you sleep on, where you carry a bag, or old injury. So just, again, it's that awareness, right? Being present to notice what is this side like compared to the other. And once again, you can stay right here. You can press into your forearm more, reach higher through your top arm, or even reach your top arm over your ear to get the side stretch. Allow for a few breaths on this side. And come back upright. And bring your feet back closer together. Across your right leg over your left, just now, you're sitting cross-legged in a chair. And then you're gonna add it, so your right leg is on top. Now you're gonna take your right arm under your left, and you can grab opposite shoulders, or yeah, Rosemary, you knew where we were going. Yeah, you can also do this full wrap, what's traditionally called eagle, where your forearms are wrapped together. Either way is fine. But squeeze your legs together and have your arms resist each other. Create some good tension there. And you can stay upright or bring your elbows down to your knees, curling in, making this small shape. And let your back round, puffing out your upper back, curling in, squeezing your legs, still squeezing your arms, and still breathing, right? Not squeezing your breath out. Keep breathing fully. Slowly, you just come back upright. And then full body stretch. Legs out in front of you, arms above, letting it all release. And now we'll go to the other side. So left leg over. Left arm under, however you'd like, whether it's grabbing your shoulders or wrapping your forearms. And go with what's not, it's not too much effort. And then you squeeze your legs together, have your arms resist each other. As you curl in, bringing your elbows to your knees once again. Just keep checking in that you're allowing yourself to breathe as you squeeze in, curl in, small. Slowly come up and take your full body stretch. Just release arms and legs straight for a moment. And then just bend your knees, plant your feet down once again.
It's another thing.
Take
So
your feet out wide. And I think Lourdes just joined us. Hi, Lourdes. And also, Lourdes, your
Hello.
mic, just so you know.
All
Okay, so
right.
take your feet out wide. Extend your right leg off to the side. So you're teetering at the edge of your chair. So just be mindful of that. Obviously, I don't want you to fall out of the chair. Right leg is out straight, heel is on the floor, right toes pointing straight up. And then you can take your arms out left to right. From here, bring your right hand down to your straight right leg, left arm up. So it's similar to what we did earlier, but obviously now your right leg is out straight. So notice, what do you feel coming into this shape? And you might feel plenty. So just stay right here, or you can slide your right hand down your leg toward your right foot and see if that changes what you feel or where you feel it, the intensity level. And we're always looking for a balance between effort and ease, right? Not too hard, not too easy, in the middle. Give this side a couple of full breaths as you hold. And then come upright. And in your own time, switch it out. Other leg straight. Heel down, toes are pointing up. Your left hand will come down to your straight left leg, right arm up. What's this side like? Is it different than the other side? You might actually need to bring your left hand up higher on your leg on this side, or you can slide your hand down lower. Just be where you find a sensation that you can work with, and breathe here, 2 or 3 breaths. And come back upright. Your knees, bringing your feet back together. Take your hands, interlace them back behind you. As like a modest back bend. You're going to reach your clasped hands down to the seat of your chair and allow your chest to lift up. And you can look up as well if that's okay on your neck. Really just going for space in your chest here as your shoulders drop down. So you really feel the breath in your chest as it's nice and open here. Take one more full breath. And then come back to neutral. Extend your right leg, this time straight out in front of you. Once again, heel down, toes are pointing up. The target here is going to be the back of your straight leg. So a key component to getting that sensation, I'm going to turn to the side, is to keep your back nice and long. Okay, so it doesn't matter how far you fold. Keep your back, your spine long. You're going to hinge from your hips to lean in toward your right leg. Again, does not matter how far you fold. What matters is what can you feel in the back of your straight leg. And if it gets too intense, you can always back off from the fold. Of course, you could always lean in more if you want to feel more. Just a couple more breaths here. Let your right toes on your straight right leg, let your toes flare back toward you. See if that gets just the last little layer of sensation, back of your knee, back of your thigh. And we'll come up and switch sides as you're ready. Left leg out straight, turn back forward. Left leg out straight, your spine is long. You hinge from your hips to lean in once again to this leg. And if you can feel your shoulders have crept up into your ears, relax your shoulders. If you're clenching your teeth, relax your jaw, breathe. And 2 or 3 more breaths. Here's your opportunity to flare your toes back, your left toes back towards you. See if that gives you more stretch in the back of your left leg. And come upright. Okay, so now something for your hips, which is really great. That last one was great because there's a lot of sitting during this conference, and this next one's good too for your hips. So if you can, bring your right ankle above your left knee. And once again, sit up tall. As soon as you sit up tall, like for me, I can immediately feel that in my right hip, right glute, inner thigh. So this, just sitting upright, this may be enough. As it were, you could also lean forward, just go nice and slow because the sensation can change pretty quick on this one. As far as what you feel in your hip, glutes, thigh. Just breathe with whatever you find. Staying here, take a full breath. Complete exhale. And come upright. Right foot down and bring your left ankle above your right knee. Sitting up tall, what's this side like? Get the information and make your decision from there, whether the decision is to stay upright or to lean in. Take a breath in together. Exhale. Come upright. Now both feet down. Take your feet just a little wider, not super wide, just a little wider. You're just gonna forward fold. So I'll suggest bring your forearms to your thighs or your knees and then round your spine down. That might be enough. You could also reach your hands down for your shoes or the floor, folding a bit deeper. It does not matter how much you fold, just getting a stretch all along your spine, if you can find that, and letting your head drop completely. And now slowly, like really take your time coming back upright so you don't get dizzy. Once you're fully upright, bring your right hand to your left knee and your left hand to your chair back or arm of your chair, whatever you can hold on to, and take a twist to the left. As you take your twist, sit up tall. Just keep letting yourself turn to the side. Staying in the twist, take a really full breath in. And maybe you twist a little bit more when you breathe out. Come back through center. And take your twist to the other side. Left hand to your right knee, right hand behind you, turn to the right. Stay in the twist, take a deep breath, see if you can sit up any taller. And exhale, twist a little more if you'd like. Come back to center. And then ending how we started, just rest your hands wherever is comfortable for you. And close your eyes if you'd like. And as you sit in relative stillness, notice any percolations, right? Any little sensations rolling through your body. Scan all the way from your feet, up your legs, up through your torso, down your arms, shoulders, neck, face. Notice your heartbeat. Notice the rhythm of your breath. Nothing manipulated, just its natural pattern. And finally, if you'd like, place your left hand on your chest, your right hand on your stomach. And now you might be able to feel even more intimately your heartbeat, your breath. And all together, take a really, really deep breath in. Open your mouth, exhale. And open your eyes if they're closed. And that's your postural practice for this afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Oh.
Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yes, y'all are very welcome. I'll hopefully see you again tomorrow.
Okay, so we'll do a little switching around here for the next panel. Okay, hi everybody. I'm gonna move myself around here a second. Okay, can people hear me? I just changed my microphone. Yeah. Okay, great. So welcome everybody to the Non-Human Ministry panel. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm John Fries. I'm one of the co-organizers of the conference. And so I'm just here to help Lourdes. Lourdes will be the one facilitating this panel today. So I'm just the assistant and any technical needs that need to be taken care of.
Yes, as some of you know, I'm a neo-Luddite, and so I need all the technical help possible. And so I want to welcome you all to the non-human panel. And I also want, before I introduce the panel members and the object of this panel, I want to acknowledge Dot, Saunders Perez, and Ali Sweet, who have been really important in putting together this panel and advocating for it. As many of you know, in the Buddhist tradition and in other traditions, the first precept is non-injury and non-violence to all living beings. And that means animals, humans, and even plants. And so this panel has invited 3 people who are in the business of acknowledging that precept, and also protecting, assisting, and as important, respecting animals and plants, and also in many cases acknowledging that we also need to protect, respect, and communicate with spirits in transition. And that will become a little bit clearer when Dr. Bittel talks about her work. So let us begin with Dr. Bittel. Ella is a holistic veterinarian. She practices with animals, acupuncture, all sorts of chiropractic methods, homeopathy, and most important, she provides hospice care to animals, which is something that unfortunately is not very common. She also trains professionals and non-professionals on how to provide hospice care. Ella is also a meditator, and I believe she currently is living and working in Costa Rica. Is that correct? And so she has recorded her presentation, although she is here to answer questions. And I am going to play that recorded presentation. We did this just in case there was a technical failure. So without further ado, John, maybe you can begin.
Right, so Chris is
Showing the video.
handling the video, and so I'm
Okay.
gonna make Chris a co-host so that he can play the video.
So if someone hears a lot of background noise and thinks there's something wrong with their computer, it's just the eternal 24/7 cricket concert that happens in Costa Rica.
Welcome. Welcome to this brief dip into a rather vast topic, the option of giving hospice care to our animal companions at the end of their lives. Here you see me with Fudge, volunteering for a client of mine, so she could fetch some much needed sleep. Inevitably, Fudge in return taught me many ways in which we can support an animal through the last phase of its life. And it is a passion of mine to share as much as I can with others interested in the topic. So thank you so much for giving me this chance here today. When we choose to share our lives with animals, as much trouble as they can be, we get oh so richly rewarded by their companionship. To me, they're hysterical in their humanness, moment-to-moment reminders of the eternal display of attachments and aversions, really. They win our hearts over with their innocence and their tremendous capacity to give and receive love. Some of us have learned to generate metta by first directing it at a beloved animal. May I introduce this pup here? Her name is Swanee. Swanee was the heart dog of a very dear friend of mine, Bunny, who in honor of Swanee has run and is still running our free Spirits in Transition Animal Hospice Helpline for the last 16 years. That's about how old Swanee got too. What joy, bounding through the waves. Dogs often are called best friends. Surveys show that many consider them to be a family member, and they're treated accordingly. This at least holds true for most of their lifespan. Doesn't she look fabulous? That shiny fur, these intense eyes, full of life, right? Well, this photo was taken one day before Swanee passed away. Isn't that striking? One almost wants to ask, how can that be? What happened between Swanee lying here so comfortably in her basket and this ball, one wonders? Well, most commonly, the answer would be euthanasia. Nowadays, in developed countries, in the far majority of cases, animal family members are euthanized. Veterinary medicine has advanced greatly to where very high quality care can be performed if one can afford it, one has to add, as treatment costs can get sky high, for example, in emergency care. But Swanee died in her very own time, hospiced by her lifetime friend, Bunny. Now, what is hospice? Let's just take a brief look at what really we're talking about here today. In the US, a hospice can be an actual building or also a special unit within a hospital or nursing home. Organizations that provide end-of-life care too are called hospices. They may manage traveling nurses that come to visit the patients dying at home under family care. Hospice is also a federal healthcare benefit in the US, and the approach to care that is provided is also called hospice. And that is what we will focus on here today, is hospice as a special type of care versus other approaches to end-of-life care. There's not a single definition for hospice that has been agreed upon as a standard within the US, but this slide shows that hospice care covers a much larger range of needs than conventional healthcare. Hospice is a team-oriented approach providing compassionate quality care on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level throughout the end-of-life process, tailored to the patient's needs and wishes, and also supports the family. In the US, the care extends until 13 months after the patient has died, including grief support. So this is true in human care. How about animal care? When it comes to animal care, it is even more important to realize there is no standard definition for hospice, though some efforts have been made to develop such. Here, a now historic photo of the campus of UC Davis in California. The Nikki Hospice Foundation for Pets was the co-sponsor of this veterinary hospice symposium in 2008. It was the first of its kind. I presented there too, and was a bit taken aback to hear veterinarians having each only one token hospice case to share that invariably would start with an apologetic, "The owners were Buddhists," as usually their patients ended up being euthanized, as they thought they all should be. So thanks to the Buddhist community for breaking that holy ground. At least you may get a bit more of a break when declining a euthanasia recommendation than people of another or no faith. Yet still today, it's basically a jungle out there. So be careful, as a vet offering hospice services may only be meaning some comfort care until euthanasia, or refers to senior special needs care as hospice, or to grief support, who knows? Be aware too that still the majority of veterinarians has no experience in supporting animal patients through their own dying process, and therefore understandably feel uncomfortable with clients wanting to choose that route. So it's very fortunate when an animal caregiver is able to find a veterinary professional with shared perspectives and willingness to fully engage in hospice, even when reaching unknown territory. In our work with spirits in transition, we hold the dying process as a part of life that, with appropriate care, can be just as precious as we consider birth and all of life to be. This does not mean we never would adopt euthanasia for an animal, but that we view giving a lethal injection as something that is beneficial as a last resort in cases of, for example, uncontrollable pain or unstoppable seizures. Yes, there can be a number of challenges along the way, and we might find ourselves wishing many times we would know more or could do more than we do. In fact, animal hospice may well call on all we ever learned, and frequently will expand who we know ourselves to be. On this slide, you see Momo, my companion for blessed 17 years. The day before her passing on her own. Momo was the one that woke me up to the startling recognition that, in spite of having been trained as a veterinarian in both traditional and complementary modalities, I had never learned anything about how to support an animal through its own dying process. And I realized it wasn't just me. It still today is commonplace to keep veterinary training regarding end of life limited to instructions on how to euthanize. Momo needed special care for the last month of her life. I was not aware of that what I was doing was giving hospice care. I just did the best I could at the time, but know I would make different choices today based on what I since learned. So I love for people to have the opportunity to be better prepared than I was at the time. With Spirits in Transition, we simply aim to get as close as possible to the standard of care for our dying animals as we would hope for our human loved ones to receive, and ultimately for ourselves. Just like with Swanee, isn't it amazing to see the complete presence that Momo still has here only hours before her passing? In other words, what I mean by giving hospice is that the aim is to provide comfort care until an unhastened death of the animal. As in hospice for humans, dying is embraced as nothing to be feared nor avoided. We get to live until we die, without death being postponed via futile high-tech medical interventions, nor do we hasten it by ending a life before it will on its own. Still, the comfort care required to keep a dying individual as comfortable as possible can be quite sophisticated, depending on the particular circumstances and health challenges. And if despite very best efforts, for some reason it is indeed impossible to maintain an animal patient's comfort sufficiently, hospice care may be ended by the caregiver electing euthanasia. This in our world is the exception, not the rule. This is Otis in his hot little wheel chariot. His human guardian had taken my weekend seminar, and I got this wonderful card after his passing in his own time. When we tell a dog to stay, we really mean forever. I just love it. The card is a great reminder that there can be a considerable period of special care needed long before an animal reaches the time of hospice. Stephen Levine, who spent much of his life helping trauma victims and the dying, talks about how children tend to have an easier time dying than most adults do. Reading the chapter on dying children in Stephen Levine's book, Who Dies?, it struck me that animals might relate to death the way children do. Since Stephen Levine is known for loving and living with animals, I approached him and his wife years ago with a request if he would allow me to quote him while replacing the word child with animal and adult with human. They graciously agreed. So here, a very brief excerpt, adapted with permission from Levine's book, Who Dies? Because animals seem to have a deeper contact with the deathless, death does not seem to be such a problem. It seems that dying animals' greatest problem is the pain they feel they're causing their parents. As the human, we sometimes forget in the self-centeredness of our relationship that the concern for a loved one's well-being goes both ways. End of quote. To say briefly, animals, just like children, can teach us about dying and dying well, and to keep recentering ourselves in meditation and striving to letting go is a great gift that we can bring to our animals' process. Now, if children tend to die easier than adults, how about them being exposed to a dying animal and its care? This little dog by the name of Nene was given hospice care by her family. One night, it was having a hard time breathing, which of course was very distressing for the owner. In the morning, the kids got up and noticed gunk had completely covered the little nose openings. They cleaned it up and voila, no more breathing issues. Beginner's mind. Just look and see. While the mother was upset over not having noticed this herself in the middle of the night, she wrote to us she was so glad she didn't call the vet, as surely Nene would not have survived that visit. Nene died at home. The mom wrote to our helpline. It's still touching me. I wish I could relay effectively how grateful I am to have had you walk me through this process. You have been a true blessing, and I've learned so much. I'm now a strong advocate for animal hospice, a process I didn't even know was an option until a few short days ago. And I have won over a few too, family, and friends. Thank you a million times over. This is Momo, shortly before her passing. Tired, yes. Now, if even children can do it, what in the world may keep us from ministering to our dying animal loved ones as we would to a human loved one? What keeps us from receiving this enormous last gift they can impart on us? The reasons are many. Let's at least take a brief glance, though it would be worthwhile to contemplate them further sometime, as once we have done that, we're less prone to fall prey to them. Are you ready? All kinds of fears raise their head, or one may simply not be informed or prepared, like the lack of realization that number one, hospice can be done, and number two, understanding how to do it. We have already dispelled ignorance number one, right? Latest starting today, you know hospice can be done for animals. How to do it? Well, that's a longer conversation. There's online classes for that, and infinite amounts can be learned from supporting friends whose animal is dying, if not your own. But if this is something you want to consider pursuing one day, it's absolutely worthwhile to educate oneself prior. We at Spirits in Transition always say, the time to prepare is while your animal is still well. Frankly, yes, it can be a very messy, scary, taxing to downright exhausting undertaking. Most certainly not everyone's cup of tea. But those types of challenges can hardly hold someone back who feels very strongly about not wanting to kill, or for whom it simply does not resonate with at the time to give permission to have a loved one's life be ended. As a matter of fact, those of my clients who hospice their animals are all heroes to me. Some of them have done things I don't even know if I could pull them off myself. This is not to say that it's a given that one always succeeds in giving hospice until the animal passes peaceful in its own time without euthanasia. But many times it is possible. Fear is the great barrier to human growth, says Robert Monroe, the great explorer of out-of-body experiences. The majority of our animal companions gets euthanized weeks, months, and years before they would die otherwise. If they would receive continued care, they would continue enjoying life. Most get euthanized long before they would be a hospice patient. The most commonly expressed reason for euthanasia is that we don't want the animal to suffer. Now, those who contemplate the Four Noble Truths can be at an advantage here over the general population. Yes, we too don't want our animal to suffer, and we will do all we can to ease suffering through our care, but we also understand and accept that pretty much one who is alive shall experiencing some suffering. We don't believe as much in a better tomorrow if we just try to avoid suffering today. Moreover, not everyone who is suffering rather wants to be dead. So when we're being told we ought to give our animal the gift of euthanasia as to avoid it, possibly suffering, we shall remember this Buddha's paraphrased advice. Believe nothing, no matter where you're at it or who has said it, not even if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. Those who have found their way to meditation will have a priceless ally in facing the challenges that come with a profound undertaking such as giving hospice care. It may feel difficult to make the time for it then, but you can do it sitting right by your animal. There's so many questions that can arise begging to be resolved that no one has an answer for. Meditation can be your rescue and your anchor. Amiga here had nasal cancer. The tumor can impair breathing as it grows. Just a diagnosis like this would for most animals mean they would either not walk out of the hospital alive or be started on harsh treatments. But Amiga's mom chose to do hospice while remaining open to euthanasia. With the very amazing and intricate care she received by her mom, Amiga was able to go in her own time, peacefully, and with her mom and her dog buddies right around her. This was Amiga's farewell party with her closest friends. Hospice fully honors the connection between the animal and its humans, yet at the same time allows everyone to slowly and gradually let go, often also greatly easing the grieving process of those who stay behind. This is my veterinarian husband and our Samson. My wish is that every caregiver offering hospice will find the support and resources needed, and that especially those who witness the normal dying process for the first time may have someone with experience and wisdom on their side. And in case it isn't how it all plays out, and we cannot grant a peaceful dying process to our animal companion, it's essential to have phone numbers on hand of veterinarians who are willing to do in-home euthanasias on short notice and also during the night. Most people find the higher cost of an in-home euthanasia worth for having the animal die in its familiar environment. You also can choose to not have the vet take the body away right away if you would like to do a vigil. Since this is a less common practice, make sure to discuss this wish ahead of time. Kids can be such naturals, and not only hospice, but also aftercare. This is Emma, granddaughter of Gail Pope, the founder of the animal hospice sanctuary, Bright Haven. When Emma's kitty Elvis died at age 25, Emma wanted to take his body to school to show it to everyone. I think that was a great idea. If every child was as comfortable with it dying as Emma, we would live in a different world. Emma has seen many animals come and go at her grandma's, but this little mouse was her very own animal. She's very pleased with the way Princess Celestina's body is being honored. I presented a weekend seminar at Bright Haven that included information as to why it makes sense to hold a 3-day vigil, not only from the perspective of the ones left behind, but also for the potential benefit of the deceased. Gail just absolutely ran with the idea with ever new display creations. If you find yourself listening to this presentation, having euthanized an animal or more of yours, and now you find yourself wondering if that was the best thing to do, remember that you made the decision from love. And indeed, it was the best you could do with the information you had. And the best we can do is all we can do at any given point in time. Gift yourself with all the compassion and perhaps forgiveness you need. Whether we are Buddhists or not, Buddha okays all beings. And forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge the future. A colleague of mine said it so well when she lost her dog. Forgiveness is not a word that would even apply in a dog's mind, as there's never anything we do or don't do that needs forgiving from a dog's perspective. Cats may be a different story, but I too might still today choose euthanasia under certain circumstances, though I hope I won't have to. It's reassuring to have it available as a very last resort. This concludes my presentation for today. We're now ready for any questions or comments you may have. Thank you so very much for your attention, and the very best for you and your animal companions.
Thank you so very, very much, Ella. This was amazing. And I'm wondering if our small audience has any questions, concerns, issues, or like I used to tell my students, protest. Anyone wants to? I just want to ask a question. Do you find a difference in your work in Costa Rica with the notion of death and dying in animals than what you found in the United States?
Yes, very much so. And I think it's because here the animals do not have that status of a family member. So animals here are really quite fortunate if they even get enough to eat.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not tied up all their life, if they get anti-parasite medication for once. Of course, there's some other people who really take care of their animals, and yes, with them, it's just as much of interest. It's all a matter of how deeply one connects with the being itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's amazing your work, and thank you very much for the presentation. It really deeply touching as is your work. So, and
thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
and this
inviting.
well, and this is something that is seldom talked about.
Yeah.
Certainly, if it's not talked about among veterinarians, imagine it's not talked about anywhere else that I can think of. So thank you very much, Ella. And finally, our paths crossed. Let us have presentation by our second speaker, Paul Moss. Paul has degrees in biology, agronomy, and marketing. And he has been associated with the Crossroads Foundation, not the Crossroads Foundation, but with the Cottonwood Foundation. Since 1992, it's a foundation that works with humans, animals, to make the possibility of us having a better life on Earth. And he is now a member of the board of directors of the Plant Initiative organization and works on behalf of plants. And I think this is an important presentation because there's always a debate as to whether plants are alive, whether they have intelligence, emotion, and so forth. And Buddhists have not been at the forefront of this issue. They have sort of skirted around the issue a little bit, in my personal opinion. So, Paul?
Thank you so much, Lourdes. I really appreciate the invitation to speak, and really enjoyed the first speaker, and I'm honored to be here today. I'm going to have a presentation here, and let's see if we can share my screen so that you can see that. Will I be able to share the screen then? I think I have to be made a co-host, John, so I can share the screen, or Chris.
Okay, I just push the button to make you co-host. Do you see it?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, can everyone see that then now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hang on a second here. Just have to. Go down. Hang on. I have to bear with me a second. move this bar at the bottom so I can make it full screen. Can you help me to do that, John?
I think there's a little projector image to the left of the slider on the bottom right.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
right.
yes.
Trying to get to that, but it's being covered by the Zoom controls.
Oh, so then you may have to move. You can move the Zoom control out of the way usually.
Okay, there you go. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Perfect.
There we
Okay.
go.
Great. I'll move the Zoom control back. So thank you again. The topic I'll be talking about today is plants as sentient being. And as you were already introduced to me, the only thing I would mention is that if what I'm saying today is of interest, then there was a conference that was held last summer called Toward a New Way of Being with Plants. And the website is there, beingwithplants2021.org. And there were many speakers and presentations, many of which are available online, they're all available online at that website. So you could, feel free to, if you want to explore this further. And also, just so you know, I've made the presentation available on a PDF to the organizers. And so there will be a number of references that I'll talk about. And those will all be available if you want to contact the organizers afterwards. And I'm happy that they would share the PDF of this talk with you, with all the references on there. So the key question, and I think, Lourdes, I really appreciate you brought that up. It's really a challenge in terms of knowing how do we connect with plants and what are plants. And I think that part of the challenge is to what degree are plants like us in terms of our ability to understand them. Whereas I would say that any being should be treated respectfully, regardless if it's like us or not. I think it is easier emotionally to connect with other beings if we can see some similarities there. So the point of the first portion of my presentation is just to go through very briefly just some examples of how plants have some, perhaps for some of you or not, surprising abilities, and in some ways are much more complex than we understood. I think there's been a real incentive for humans in general in the dominant culture to look at plants in a way as just resources and objects to be used for whatever people want to do with them. In indigenous cultures, that's not the case. It's more of a connection with relationship and respect and reciprocity. But in our culture, plants have been delegated to a fairly low status and are expected to just be neutral objects for whatever you want to do. And so I think some of what I'll show you is a little bit of just kind of maybe raising questions about that, if that's an appropriate attitude or not. Okay. So scientists in the past decades have been increasingly investigating issues about what plants are capable of. And these are a few names that I'll be mentioning, most of them in this presentation. This book, What a Plant Knows, is something that I think that some of you may find of interest. It's, in a way, it's looking at plant abilities through the eyes of human or animal senses, so it helps us to understand them a little bit better. So I'm going to take that perspective over the next few minutes when I go through some of these senses that plants have and how that, how we could learn about those. So first, I'll just talk about plants can touch and feel. And, this is a vine climbing up a wall, but there's a lot of touch involved in plants, the way that they behave, particularly visible for vines. I'm going to try and show a brief video here, if this will work. And this is just the sensitive plant, which maybe some of you have seen. Let's see if this can come through, and including. Can you hear the sound as well?
No.
Yeah, I heard it, but maybe we can go back because I think you can hear.
Okay. So it's just, yeah, there's no, it's just showing over and over again how this plant responds to touch. And it's just an example of something that shows that some plants have visible ability to show that they're responding to, people's interaction with them. Here is the Venus flytrap. And this is, I'll just show you a portion of the video. It's actually a little bit maybe disturbing because it involves end of life for one of the insect involved, but I just show you a portion of it. But the point is, though, is that, plants are agents with a lot of abilities, and certainly touch and feel is one of them. So I'll just start that. All right, we won't watch that violent act here, but you get the point that plants, they're, nothing to trifle with, and that they do have the ability to sense movement and to make intelligent decisions based on that. So plants can see light. Obviously, light is super important for plants because of photosynthesis. This is how they get their food, so they're very sensitive to light. This is just an extraordinary article that was written about leaf mimicry in a climbing plant. And what this shows here is that there's a vine in southern Chile that grows, and it can change the shape of its leaves depending on what kind of plant it's growing on. So for example, on A here, you can see that there's T is the tree leaf and V is the vine. So when it's growing on a tree that has leaves like this, it winds up having leaves that look almost identical. And this article here just shows some of the same examples where the vine and the tree wind up looking exactly the same. And that, the mechanism for that is really not completely known, but some scientists feel that it's good evidence for that plants are able to not only perceive light, but see shapes and images and to respond to them. So it's just a kind of an extraordinary kind of article. Plants can hear. There's two examples I'm going to provide about that. One is this is a study that was done where they were playing the sound of bees to a plant, and what would happen is that when the sound of the bee was played to the plant, it would increase its sugar content because it's trying to attract pollinators. So it's just showing it was a clear relationship about how these flowers are responding to sound quickly by increasing their sugar concentration. So again, it's just showing how plants they're feeling, seeing, hearing, and this is a short video I'll play here. That's just about 1.5 minutes, and it talks another way that plants are able to hear.
We cannot hear.
Can't hear?
Uh-uh.
Okay,
Yeah, I
hang
think
on.
when you choose to share the screen, there's a little box you got to tick off that says play the sound.
Okay, hang on.
So what you might want to do is try stopping the screen share and then screen
Okay.
share again.
Okay,
And then there should be 2 little boxes there to tick off when you're,
okay.
yeah.
Share sound. Okay, yeah, got it. Thanks.
Cool.
How about now? Let's try it again.
Like plants listen, but
Can
when the
you hear
caterpillar
now?
of the cabbage butterfly starts eating, the Arabidopsis plant hears danger loud and clear. Scientists at the University of Missouri recently discovered that this tiny mustard plant creates chemical defenses in response to the chewing vibrations of this predator.
We've known for some time that plants can respond to single vibrations or to music, but we haven't known why they do that and how.
They used specialized lasers to detect these vibrations.
My part of the collaboration involves recording the tiny vibrations produced by the caterpillars as they're feeding, analyzing those and reproducing them, playing them back to the plant. And Heidi's part is to look at the way the plant responds chemically to deter those herbivores.
The results show that plants ignore vibrations created by non-threatening insects and environmental factors like wind, while turning on defenses when the vibrational sound of chewing happens. A grant from the National Science Foundation will let their team continue this research.
Understanding how plants detect and respond to sounds in their environment gives us new ways to help plants defend themselves against their insect pests. It also opens the window of plant behavior just a little wider, so we see that plants respond to outside influences in their environment in ways that we do, although the exact responses may look a little different.
Okay, great, thanks. So plants can learn. This next study is just I'll just go through that quickly, but this is with that sensitive plant again, and it shows that they were able to train the plant to ignore the fact that when it's dropped from 15 centimeters onto a soft surface, at first it will close up because it's kind of shocked, and it's responding to this potentially dangerous situation. After they drop it several times, it'll stop closing up. It realizes that there's nothing going on. So it's not just a mechanical response. It kind of learns that there's really no danger here. Even when they come back after a much longer period of time, it will still not close up again. So it's retaining the information. And there's other examples of how plants have been trained to do things as well. This book is particularly interesting by a plant scientist, and it talks about these as well as other experiments that she's done with plants. Plants can tell time. This is an example from the sunflower, where sunflowers during the day will face the sun, and that's partly because the sun warms up the flower and enables it to disseminate more fragrance that attracts the pollinators. But what happens at night, there is no light. The plant is able to prepare for the next day. It continues to move throughout the night so that it's ready to face the dawn, the sun at dawn again. So it's just showing that the plant not only is it's kind of predicting the future, it's telling time, but it's also, not just responding to a stimulus from the sun. It's preparing for the next day. So it's kind of it's an interesting study. And then plants communicate through their roots in combination with fungi. They're able to share information and materials and other types of things, nutrients. So there's a study about that as well. And this book was recently written by that scientist, Finding the Mother Tree. It's a popular book from last year, and I'd recommend that if you're interested in learning more about that. So one last thing is that plants are also able to communicate through the soil and air through various chemicals, and they can communicate specific information about insect attacks or mechanical damage or drought or air pollutants. So they have quite a way of communicating with each other. So in a way, I'm trying to show that plants are not all that different than animals. Philosophers are also rethinking plants because what are the implications of this? What does this mean in terms of how we should be treating plants or interacting with them from an ethical perspective? So this book, Plants as Persons, is particularly helpful, as is any of the work from Val Plumwood. And it's starting to affect the way that law and government are looking at plants and trees as well. There's a whole move internationally about the rights of nature. The middle document here is that the Swiss government had commissioned a committee to specifically look at the dignity of living beings with regard to plants and how should plants be treated with dignity. That was in 2008. And then, as early as 1972, legal experts were thinking about, should trees and plants have legal standing? So there's also the spiritual perspective where there's a lot of people, and certainly in indigenous cultures, but also in the dominant culture, where there is intuitive communication with plants. And there's many books about that. So just want to point that out as well. So I guess the question here, I want to just stop the screen sharing just for a sec because I can't see everyone. I want to make sure I can see everyone again. It doesn't seem to want to show me everyone's face if I'm sharing. Maybe there's a way. Is there a way I can still see people as well as present?
John?
I'm not sure. Usually I can see
Like
a
maybe
side
it's the difference in view. Anyway, I don't have to see everyone. So just so you know, I can't see you right now while I'm sharing the screen. All right. Okay, here that comes back now. Good. So how do we relate to plants more respectfully? What do we do with this information? So seeing plants as sensitive, intelligent beings, how do we respond to that? That's really a key question. There's three general areas that I would recommend that people think about in this regards. One is to reduce the use and consumption of plants. So avoid wasting plants, refrain from unnecessarily or destructive uses of plants. These are on our website from the Plant Initiative, by the way. Consider eating plant parts as foods instead of the entire plant. Try and allow plants to complete their natural life cycles. Reduce or avoid consumption of animal products, which are often produced at through great numbers of plants, and support alternative agriculture plants that reduce destruction of plants. Protect and restore plants, so treat plants with respect, avoiding damage to them in your home or yard or community, giving them the necessary water, care that they need. Try and protect, restore, and increase wild plant habitat, and protect pollinators, support organizations working for these things, and be proactive with protecting plants from things that threaten them. And then rethinking plants, which is part of the goal of this presentation, which is to question your assumptions about plants when people just talk about them as raw materials and resources. Think about how we research with them and learn more about them and explore indigenous perspectives and traditional environmental knowledge and build personal connections with plants in your life. So just as Lourdes mentioned, there's an organization that we've started, the Plant Initiative, and we're trying to build a movement to increase respect for plants, to encourage ethical behavior towards plants. Whereas for animals, there has long been quite a strong animal advocacy movement, but there hasn't really been something like that specifically for plants. And so we feel that in light of where we're at right now in society, that there's a need for thinking about and acting differently, towards plants. And so that's what we're trying to do. We have a monthly email newsletter. If people are interested, feel free to sign up. Here's the references. And again, these are all on a PDF. And, feel free to check some of these out. And thank you. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much, Paul. I think this is a very important topic. There's still much to do in terms of animal advocacy and animal services. Advocacy, as Bob Isaacson will talk about, and the kinds of services that Ella presented via the animals. And I think Buddhists, not all Buddhists, but most Buddhists would sort of say, oh, this is extremely important, though, as there are exceptions, and Bob will talk about those exceptions. But there is kind of an attitude towards dealing with the sentience of plants within the Buddhist community that I find really strange. And then I went back to the roots of this debate, and it dates back to the Buddha. And I think it is really important to talk about this. I was very lucky. I grew up with a paternal grandmother who was Maya, and she encouraged me to talk to plants, to ask permission from plants, to play music and sing to plants, and everything like that. But of course, this is something that was done just simply because she told me so. But lately, I've been reading the incredible work done by people like Gagliano, Mancuso, in terms of documenting not only intelligence, but emotional life of plants. And then there is, of course, I strongly recommend any work by Mancuso or by Gagliano. I also recommend any work by the philosopher Martyr and Val Plumwood, because I think we really need to address this, and particularly in my case, among Buddhists, but also among the population at large. There is no such thing as a plant that is dead, and has never been alive. And I think this is important. It also raises a lot of questions of some of us who are vegans or vegetarians, and what are some of the things that you outlined there that we need to do in order to reduce what we do to plants, in order to be able to be, more, shall we say, careful with our animal life. And so your presentation, I think, extraordinarily valuable, and the work that you're doing in Plant Initiative is really valuable. And I do hope that those who are doing animal advocacy could get together with people who are doing plant advocacy, and integrate these perspectives. And I'm thinking now about plant hospice, actually, because I have right now a dying plant that I'm talking to her, him, or they. And I think I'm providing hospice. And everybody says to me, throw the plant away. That's useless. It doesn't look good. And I'm there with my plant talking to her, him, or whatever. And I think this is really important. So thank you so very much. Any questions from our small audience?
Yeah.
Hi,
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Paul. That was very interesting. Can I ask you, do you eat plants?
Well, sure. I think we all eat plants directly or indirectly.
Mhm.
Yeah, we eat
But
them indirectly when we eat animals, and we eat them directly when we eat plants, right? Is that what
Right.
you-
I mean, plants are the basis of all life on Earth. I mean, they're providing us with oxygen. They're providing us with the food that we eat. So I think it's a question of, you can't avoid killing plants. I think what you can do is avoid wasting plant lives
Mhm.
and treating them disrespectfully. And so I think the challenge is to figure out ways of doing those things. I think so. It's not like you can have like a prohibition, and I think if you look at indigenous cultures, the way they are connect with the fact that we have to kill other beings to eat them. It's not just that we have to keep certain types of beings like off limits, that we can't like eat plants. That's the way the system is organized. Is that organisms share. There's life and death within all organisms, right? It's like a system that's based on both life and giving life and sharing life and through relationship. So I think it's not just a question of, like we're not trying to say that we should not eat plants. We have to eat them.
Also, there are ways of not harming plants that don't necessarily mean not eating them. For example, right now, there's an emphasis of taking the seed out of many plants. For example, people now don't want to buy avocados that have seed. So they're doing all sorts of things so the avocado will not have seed. And that happened with the banana too. The banana, had seeds, and now you cannot find a banana that has a seed. And so we manipulate plants and we sort of do things to plants that I think we shouldn't be doing. So there are many ways in trying respectfully plants that accept that to a certain degree, all of us are involved in this cycle of life and death. We call it samsara in Buddhism. And there is no way of avoiding, having others suffer just because of our presence in the earth, on the earth. And so, but thank you so very much, Paul. I really appreciate this presentation. And any other questions, any other comments?
I had just kind of an observation in general based on the past presentation and the present one. So I guess one thing just, I think of our Western culture and it going back to the Greek philosophy and Greek science, and that Aristotle is considered like the founder of Western science, and his research was based on observing animals and then killing and dissecting the animals. And then he had a research partner that was observing plants and dissecting plants. And then Aristotle became the tutor for Alexander the Great. And he's famous for telling Alexander, treat the Greeks like your friends and treat the Persians like plants and animals. So
Yeah.
it was kind of built in. The Greeks were defeated by the Persian Empire, and then they wanted to take revenge. And so this idea of scientific materialism resulting in a lack of sensitivity or a lack of ability to relate to other beings I feel like that's one important element. And then when we were talking about animals passing away and having a vigil for 3 days for the animal, that the idea of possibly connecting with the spirit of the animal as part of the companionship process of the animal passing away. So I guess I'm just seeing a similar theme of possibly the need to open up to a spiritual dimension within humans that allows us to open to a spiritual dimension within animals and plants beyond just what we can observe through kind of the normal scientific observation.
Some of my Dharma students are using the Bardo Todo, for example, not only to do the 49-day practices for animals in addition to humans, but also now to plants. And for example, this particular plant that I think I'm working with in terms of a hospice scenario, I will do the 49 days of practice. And so, or when I see a dying plant, and I think that needs to be incorporated in some of the Vajrayana and other practices that we do as Buddhists. You know, so the Jain tradition has a lot to teach us in this way. So now we have our final presentation by Bob Isaacson. Bob was for about 25 years a civil and human rights attorney. Presented cases to the Supreme Court. And for several years now, he has been president and is the co-founder of a very important organization called Dharma Voices for Animals. And this organization understands that there are Buddhist teachers and practitioners that really take very much to heart the injunction of nonviolence towards all living beings, but not all. And some Dharma centers are also problematic in this respect. Bob is a Theravada Vipassana practitioner. He was trained at Spirit Rock, and he leads some sanghas in the San Diego area. So Bob, without further ado, talk about all the things we've been talking for a while.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for today because I'm going to talk to you directly. First, I'm going to say a few things about not eating animals, which is that's our mission, to try to persuade, encourage Buddhists or people that practice the Dharma to not eat animals, which is possible. It's not possible, as Paul mentioned, to not eat plants. In fact, if you love plants, the best thing to do is eat them directly, because otherwise you'll be eating 10 times as many plants if you eat animals, because the plants are fed to the animals. I mean, if you care about the life of the plants, eat them directly. There's no other way you can eat. So that's, and I actually, and when I give talks, I've given talks all around the world, a lot in Asia, many different countries, in Europe and the United States. But I'm just one person. I've been the president CEO of DVA for 11 years now. We started out, I'm going to segue into tell you a little about DVA, or Dharma Voices for Animals. Now I want to talk about the Buddha's message, which is kind of a universal ethical message about not harming sentient beings. So we started DVA, Patty, Kim, David, and I, back in 2011, and in California. And we thought, you know, there's a lot of retreat centers here, a lot of Buddhists in California, so we'll stay in California. And I realized after a few years that Buddhists live in Asia. 98.5% of the Buddhists approximately live in Asia. So we started going, I started traveling to Asia, I made 10 trips there. And now we have big projects in the Buddhist countries of Thailand and Vietnam and Sri Lanka. So we're the only international Buddhist animal advocacy organization in the entire world. International Buddhist animal advocacy organization. And that's a big responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity. So in the three countries in Asia that we work in, so I mentioned Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, there are 140 million Buddhists, 140 million. So that's where we are right now. Maybe someday China, and we have different, we have a project in each of these three countries. Sri Lanka started a number of years ago. Thailand's the most recent, about 2.5 years ago. And all three projects are going strong. We recently started in US, and Lourdes knows about this. We've talked about it. So we're trying to persuade centers in the United States to stop serving animal flesh and animal products. So that would be, milk and eggs and all. But, we're into encouraging incremental change to save as many animals as we can. So what did the Buddha say about eating animals? So as Lourdes mentioned, I'm a Buddhist practitioner. I've been practicing Dharma for 27 years now. I've been a lay Dharma teacher, Dhamma teacher, as we call it, for about 16 years. I have a Sangha here. I teach multiple day retreats. I have a day of mindfulness, which is just a one-day retreat. And I mentor lots of people who are interested in or really have their lives guided by the Buddhist teachings. So why do we start DVA? We started DVA, or Dharma Voices for Animals, because the Buddha's message was really strong about, and Lourdes mentioned, you mentioned this earlier, about circle of compassion, about non-harming sentient beings. Sentient beings can feel pain. Sentient beings can feel pain. So we know, after a wonderful talk earlier about hospice for dogs, I was also a hospice volunteer here in northern San Diego County called Solana Beach for about 7 years. And I mean, I was touched. My heart was touched by your presentation and by your work. And there are countries in the world. So we think there's about 1 billion Buddhists. We're not sure. Somewhere between 500 million and 1 billion. That's a lot of Buddhists, and the Buddhists eat a lot of animals. It's estimated about 1 trillion animals are eaten in the world every year. It's really hard to break down the number of aquatic animals, because they measure them in tons. They just pick them up out of the ocean. There's like millions of them in each of the catches. It's really hard to measure them, but still at about 1 trillion is a pretty good estimate. So what about people, Buddhists and others, eating dogs? I mean, it's prevalent in China, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Vietnam. And you go down the street, you see, just walking around, you see dogs in large cages, and those dogs are headed for someone's plate. So we don't, in our organization, we treat all the animals that we're trying to be a voice for the same way. But my own heart touches dogs. I had a dog when I was a young boy, and I think really that's the reason why I'm vegan. I've been vegan for almost 20 years now, vegetarian for another 30 to 25 years before that. So I don't eat animals. I don't eat animal products, and we encourage people to do that. All people, but we're really concentrated on Buddhists. So what did the Buddha say about this? So the Buddha said, first of all, in Mahayana, there's two basic, let's call them schools. It's not a great term, but for lack of a better term, there's basically two divisions, maybe that's a little bit better. There is Mahayana, which includes Tibetan, kind of, in the basic.
Yes,
Mahayana.
okay.
There's also a separate subdivision for Tibet, Vajrayana. Also, the second is Theravada, and Theravada is my practice. So Theravada comes from countries including Thailand, Burma or Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, also some in Cambodia and Laos. And then Mahayana is the rest of the Asian Buddhist world, including China, including Tibet, although Tibet has their, as I mentioned, their kind of their own brand and their own clearly different division of Buddhism. Mahayana is the Buddhism of most of the Buddhists in the world, overwhelming numbers. Can't really put a number on it, but for those Mahayana Buddhists in the world, the Zen people out of Japan and Korea and Vietnam, the Pure Land people out of China and Taiwan, etc., the Tibetan folks, all of them are Mahayana. And the scriptures talk about the Buddha being a vegetarian himself and wanting his followers to be vegetarian. So that's a pretty good start for an organization that's trying to encourage Buddhists to stop eating animals. It's a pretty good start. So this is why we started DVA. We started it because as a Buddhist organization, we have a strong, couldn't be any stronger message from the Buddha. He's vegetarian, doesn't want his followers to be. But unfortunately, so many Buddhists in the world, it's hard to say, but probably a vast majority of the Buddhists, certainly in Thailand and in Vietnam, where we have between those two countries, 125 million Buddhists. Certainly, they're not vegetarian. They're eating whatever they can eat. And a lot of people are poor, and there's economic reasons behind that for sure. So we have a strong message by the Buddha. We have non-compliance by Buddhists themselves, people that self-identify as Buddhists. And we also have this is the basic reason why DVA was organized. And we've made some amazing progress in these countries. In the US, it's more difficult because there aren't, other than Asian American communities, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Thai, Burmese, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there aren't so many European American communities that self-identify as Buddhists. People are affiliated with different centers, like I am with Spear Rock and Insight Meditation in Massachusetts. So you got this strong message. Okay, then it's a little bit less clear, a bit less clear in Theravadan Buddhism. Mahayana, most of the Buddhist world, Buddha was vegetarian. Buddha didn't want his followers to eat animals, and he said that directly. Now, in Theravadan Buddhism, there is no strict, explicit prohibition against eating animals. But the most important teaching, we call these suttas, Mahayana, suttas, which is Pali, the first written language the first spoken language that was actually broken down and written out in the teachings. It's called suttas. So in Theravadan Buddhism, there's a famous teaching, and the teaching is called the Jivaka Sutta. And the Jivaka Sutta laid down a rule, and the rule was, if you're a monk, so that would include women and men monks, on alms rounds. So I'm doing this because you hold an alms bowl. This is alms round. And this is at the time of the Buddha, this is how the Buddha was fed. And for the most part, some food was brought in also, as I understand the history to be. If you go on alms round and someone puts in your bowl something that when you suspect, if you just so much as suspect that the animal was killed to feed you, you can't eat it. If you know that the animal was killed to feed you, you can't eat it. If you think you have a pretty good idea, it's a probability the animal was killed to feed you, you can't eat it. But of course, Buddhists in the world, as I mentioned, who knows, hundreds of millions of them are eating animals. So even in the Theravada tradition, the Buddha was not in favor of this. The Buddha said, you don't eat that food if you know it's been killed for you. So what about if you go into a store? You know what, a Thai monk, sometimes they go shopping. Much of the food is delivered by the followers. But if you go shopping, you can't go into a store and buy a breast of chicken, right? That animal was killed for you. And literally, if you think that animal wasn't killed for you, well, the next one is. As soon as you take that off the shelf, they're going to order some more chicken. So the next animal will be killed for you. So it seems to me, and I've written articles about this, and this is our core teaching in DVA, whether you're Theravadan or Mahayana, which covers all the Buddhist world, you shouldn't be eating animals. So it's a challenge to talk to monastics around the world. By the way, all the Vietnamese monastics there's about 50,000. All the Chinese monastics, like who knows, probably millions. We're talking China, biggest country in the world, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Chinese American communities all over the world. There's just an unbelievable number. All these monastics, at least according to the vows that they take, are vegetarian. And the way it's interpreted in Chinese, the word, as I'm told, I don't speak Chinese, that the word for vegetarian is the same as the word for vegan. So vegan is, of course, not eating animal flesh and not eating animal products, such as dairy, eggs, honey. Those are 3 examples. So for the Chinese and the Vietnamese monastics, millions, I think, if you put all the Chinese monastics in there, there isn't an accurate count because of the uncertainty of how many are in China. So we have a huge number of monastics that are leading a life and a lifestyle and with clear, scrupulous attention to what they put in their mouths. We have a really good starting point. So this is what we're doing in Vietnam. We're working with 50,000 monastics. They're not all helping us right now, but we're trying to reach out to them to help us with the 60 million Vietnamese Buddhists. For the most part, not all of them, most of them are eating animals all the time. And they hear the teachings at the when they go to pagoda. Pagoda means temple in Vietnamese. So this is what we do. And as I said before, I mean, if you care about plants, and we all should care about plants for all kinds of reasons, because we tear down the Amazon rainforest. I mean, my goodness, we're destroying life on this planet. But if you care about animals, you'll eat them. Rather plants, you'll eat them directly, because it's somewhere between 9 and 10 times as many animals are fed. I said it again, 9 to 10 times as many plants are fed to animals. So 1 gram of animal flesh is produced by 9 or 10 grams of vegetables. 1 gram of animal flesh is produced by 9 or 10 grams of vegetables. And the reason for that is because animals have to eat something. A lot of them are fed fish, by the way. So now this is a new thing, kind of surplus of these huge catches where millions of aquatic animals are killed in nets. So they're actually fed to cows and pigs and all. But for the most part, it's vegetables that are fed to animals. If you care about vegetables, if you care about plants, eat them directly. So you have to eat something. So what else would I like to share with you now? So the amazing thing about this is the exposure that all of us who've been working at DVA have received to different cultures. Because I mentioned I've spent a lot of time relatively a lot of time in Thailand, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka. And especially Thailand and Sri Lanka now. Vietnam has been pretty closed for the last 3 years because of COVID, but now it is opened up. And it's what I'm telling you, and the way that people relate to what they're eating and to the animals that become their food is completely different in each of those cultures. That's only 3 cultures. There's another 10 or 12 countries with major Buddhist populations in Asia. And so it's really been an education for me to learn as much as I can about each culture so that I'm able to be an effective voice for animals. So our staff, we have 15 staff members in Sri Lanka, which is where we started. So we have a pretty big staff there. We have 3 in Thailand, and we have 3 in Vietnam. So Thailand's growing quickly. Vietnam is holding its own, and Sri Lanka has grown enormously over the years. So what do people say when we talk to them? So I'm not doing a lot of the talking. I'm organizing and I'm hiring and I am coming up with materials and I am raising funds for DVA, etc. So what do our people on the ground tell? And they're all Buddhists, they're all vegetarian, most of them are vegan, not all of them. What happens when they start talking to people, talking to centers? We go into a pagoda in Vietnam, we have 1,000 people that are there pre-COVID. Now it's about 300 or 400. We expect it to get back to 1,000. We have a large audience. And then the monk or the nun, there's, by the way, lots and lots of nuns who are the head of their temples or pagodas in Vietnam. Which is great. It warms my heart. Not so in Thailand, but in Vietnam, absolutely. So what do people say? Well, they say, I don't want to eat any plants. You know, aren't plants really aren't plants entitled to our respect and our protection? And of course, the answer is yeah, but you have to eat something. So if you want to protect plants, eat them directly. Don't eat animals because you'll be responsible for 10 times the number of dead plants and killing plants. They'll say things like, I don't know, vegetarian food, I don't think it's healthy. You know, I hear this from my doctor who eats, of course, doctor eating pork and chicken and everything. It's not healthy. So what we have to do, we have to overcome this. And of course, this is the advertising campaign of the meat industry, that healthy protein directly from animals. This is the way to do it. So now we're working with nutritionists and dietitians and medical doctors and others in these countries. So it's a protein myth is what we call it. If the animals get all their protein from the plants, they eat the plants have the protein. So we feed them 10 times the number that we would eat if we ate them directly. And then we get the protein because the animals have eaten the plants. So eat the protein directly. And nobody's ever died of a protein deficiency. In our culture here in the United States, we get way more protein than we need. So that's one thing about that. Sometimes women will ask questions about calcium. And of course, there's many calcium-rich foods that you can have, that you can take. Vegetables rich in protein, etc. And we also get, I don't know how to cook vegetarian. I don't know how to do this. So we have to teach people to cook vegetarian. So this is what we're doing. We just came up with
Bob, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we're almost out of time. So can you sort
sure.
of?
Yes, so kind of summarize, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So we teach people how to cook. We just printed 10,000 cookbooks, vegan cookbooks in Sri Lanka, the first of its kind. So that's it. We take on nutrition, we take on health, and we take on the environment, because as all of you know, it is the factory farming that is the #1 cause of global warming. #1, according to the United Nations scientists. So if you want to improve your health, if you want to save the environment, if you want to protect animals and not be in any way responsible for their suffering, a vegetarian, better yet, a vegan diet is the way to go.
Thank you very, very much, Bob. In my conversations with Bob, in the Vajrayana tradition, in spite of the message of the Buddha and so forth, one of the major issues is the Tibetan medical system, because in the sutras that inform and the dharmas that inform the Tibetan medical education, certain diseases that have to do with wind and have to do with other matters that I won't get into, the only way to solve them is by eating meat. And so that's a major issue. But anyway, that's a longer conversation. Any other questions or comments about Bob's presentation? Dharma Voices for Animals has a very interesting film on their website called Dharma Voices for Animal, and it has teachers from all the Buddhist traditions, I must say, talking about the need to consume less meat and to address some of the issues that the Buddha told us about that consumption. So
yeah, and it's translated into 12 languages, including Chinese and Spanish. And it's actually called Animals and the Buddha. We started out with
Animals,
Buddha and
okay.
the Animals, but then we switched to the Animals and the Buddha. And you can
Okay.
get it just on YouTube. It's got about almost 200,000 views, but seen by millions because people are watching it at in the temples. A lot of people with only one view. But yeah, I highly recommend that. It's the filmmaker has won awards in many all around the world. So please take a look at that. Yeah, thanks for the plug. I appreciate that. And also a website, which is just Dharma Voices, plural, for FOR, animals.
.org.
.org, yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very, very much to the panelists, to the people attending this conversation. I think we need to have more of these kinds of conversations. And I will be in touch with all of you to thank you personally. And certainly we will put this conversation that we have just had in the YouTube channel. And I think we will get a wider public to view it. So thank you again very much to the panelists, and thank you to the people who are attending this particular panel. Bye-bye.
Okay, cool. So we have our next panel coming up is the prison ministry panel. So if those of you who were at the non-human ministry would like to stay, you're welcome to stay. And so Anthony Coleman and Chris Johnson and Abaya Kira will be doing this next panel. So I stopped the recording from the previous panel just so it'll separate in the Zoom world, so we don't have the two videos going together. So is there anything that y'all would like to do to prepare before I press record for this next panel?
No, I'm ready.
Are you here? I can't hear you, Chris. Like your sound is not coming forth. Uh-oh. Oh! Okay, while we're waiting, I'll just do some small talk here. Nathan, how's it going? You're in Japan? I'm not sure who's responding. Nathan is going to be presenting tomorrow on the Buddhist chaplaincy panel. Let's see.
Hello.
Hi, Nathan.
Sorry, I briefly stepped away, but then heard my name.
Oh yeah, well, we're just small talking because Chris is trying to get his audio working. So I thought I would just schmooze with you while we're waiting. What time is it in Japan?
It's 9 a.m. now, so it's
Okay.
a decent time now at least.
Right. And I saw you earlier, so you must have gotten up earlier for some of the earlier stuff.
Yeah, I think I signed on around 7 a.m.-ish.
Okay, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
And then Abaya, are you in Canada? Yeah.
Yep, still up in the woods in Canada.
Okay.
Ooh.
So is anyone else out of the United States? Oh yeah, Ella, you're in Costa Rica. Let's see, Chris is rejoining. Let's see. Anthony, you're here in California?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
How is it now?
We can hear you, yes.
Great. Sorry. I've been using that all day long. It's been fine, and something's
Right.
acting strange.
Okay, so I can press record and then make you the host, Chris. Would that be what you'd like?
Host or co-host, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We have the live stream on. Do you want to use, and there's only a few, there's not that many people here, so I don't know if you want to use focus mode or just the spotlight's fine or something, right?
What I've mainly been doing, just have speaker view, and then it just kind of automatically, whoever's speaking is put on the screen. And then when we get to the point of discussion, then I switch it back to like gallery view.
Sure.
Okay, so are y'all ready? Shall I hit record?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to the prison ministry panel. And now I'm going to make Chris the host so that he can have godlike powers over the panel. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today for this panel, this discussion on prison ministry. Others in Domicila Parisa have been involved in this work, so I'm happy and privileged to be the one to present this panel. And I just want to say a few things, and I'll hand it over to our two panelists. And you can send in comments in the chat box or on YouTube live stream if you're on YouTube. And there are other people here who have also been involved in prison work. So I hope after the panelists have spoken, you'll jump in the conversation as well. So what's been coming up for me thinking about this panel are the liminal spaces involved in the work in this world inside and outside of prison. And today we get to hear from both of these perspectives. For the better part of the past decade, I've been a volunteer chaplain in several Southern California prisons. And I had to stop and think what led me here, what led me to doing this work. How did I get here? How did I get there? And I remember the desire to actually serve in the prison system, to be of some sort of benefit, if that was at all possible, is what actually led me to train as a chaplain. And this seemed like the best fit for the few skills that I had. Buddhist toolbox, chaplain seemed fitting work. So soon after that, I, as a volunteer for the Engaged Buddhist Alliance, began visiting Buddhist groups inside the Southern California prisons. And it was there that Venerable D. Hong became my razor wire Dharma mentor. So I have to thank him. He's not here today, but his tireless efforts to help the incarcerated community continually inspire me, continue to do so. What did I think I was going to do there? What did I do there? All I can say is that what I expected was not what happened. Sometimes I'm there and the role is a chaplain, kind of to there, listen to folks. Sometimes the role is meditation teacher. I might lead group meditations or work with one student over years, developing their practice. And sometimes we just sit and talk about the mundane things in life and laugh. And that's the day we spent together. I spend a lot of time in these transition spots, the liminal spots on the way to and from the prisons, mentally composing myself before I go in for hours on the road, and then processing for long after once I've left. And the leaving strikes me every time. It's so odd, so unnatural. I can just walk out a door and that's it. And I'm a world away from that other place. But what I can say is I'm grateful for these teachers that I meet every time I walk behind the wires and the walls. So first, I'd like to introduce the first panelist, and this is Anthony Coleman. I met Anthony many years ago in state prison. Anthony was the facilitator of for the Buddhist group in one of the prison yards, and he'd been a leader of that Buddhist group for 8 years. Anthony also was a student through University of the West. He was able to take part in the distance education program. While inside, he was able to take courses in Buddhism, earning several certificates and university level Buddhist courses. And as he took these courses and led this group, I was soon to learn that he had a deep appreciation for Nagarjuna and Madhyamika Buddhist philosophy, which led to many interesting, lively discussions. It's remarkable to see, and unusual, someone inside really take to the philosophy and intricate layers in these Buddhist ideas. It's even more remarkable to see someone who takes this philosophy to heart and puts it into practice. Recently, Anthony's been putting that compassion in action. He's a co-founder of a fledgling parole resource organization called the Freedom Discovery Project. Anthony, it's great to see you. Please.
Thank you, and thank you for saying such kind words and kind of downplaying the interesting conversations that we would have inside about philosophy and practice amongst the members of our Sangha. I'd also like to express an immense amount of gratitude for the organizers of this conference for allowing me to come here and share with you tonight. So, as my name is Anthony, and I served 23 years in California State Prison on a 15 to life, which I got when I was 15 years old. I was tried as an adult and was sent into the prison system. And I hit the prison system when I was 16 years old in general population. At that time, people who were minors were not kept away from the general population. So I started my time in prison as a 16-year-old boy surrounded by 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old career criminals, gang members, and people who had done what we were calling the life in the installment plan, which is just in and out of prison their whole lives. Before I went to prison, I can't even say I grew up, because I didn't really grow up on the streets, but I lived in a household that was very dysfunctional and was marked with several types of abuse, such as neglect and physical abuse and sexual abuse. And by the time that I was 13, I was pretty dedicated to running around in the streets and actually not being home. And in the streets, I met plenty of interesting people, some of which were members of organized crime, not the mafia kind, but people who were criminals in an organized way and members of organized criminal structure. And I was actually doing errands as a 13, 14, and early 15-year-old for them. I had developed a very bitter way of living my life at an early age. And I took it out on everybody. I didn't trust anybody. And I never let anybody get close to me, and I was physically violent towards my peers, towards adults, and eventually led to my arrest in 1998. When I first went to prison, I lost everything. Everybody that I had ever known turned their back on me. So when I entered the gates, there was no outside support for me, no family support, no financial support. And I had developed this very shut down view of life, and I emotionally shut down except for anger, because that had been what I had been surviving on for already, the last 10 years of my life. I had survived on confrontation and violence, and it was a shock. I had never been around adults in that capacity, where you're constantly around each other. You're have to shower with each other, you're living in cells with each other, you're in this environment where there was no getting away from the violence and politics, what we call politics in prison, the inmate politics, the inmate rules. Nor had I ever had been subjected to such a concentration of violence and corruption. And I was shut down, and that the only thing that I knew how to do to survive was to fight. And I participated in the violence early in my time in prison. And it eventually led me to be in the security housing unit, which is more commonly known as the SHU, and is solitary confinement, where I spent 27 months by myself, single cell, and only going to yard maybe once a week for an hour or so, getting some type of yard in an enclosed cement facility attached to the building. During my time in the SHU, I was assigned mandatory reading. When you go into the SHU, your race assigns you mandatory reading and has you do book reports on those readings. And those readings were Nietzsche and Carl Jung and Adolf Hitler and Aristotle, and a lot of philosophy that the inmates who organized inside used to manipulate and kind of put their spin on that philosophy to propagate whatever it was that they were trying to get other people to obey. It was during that reading that I actually kind of became in touch with my own intellectual side, in that I didn't see those writings in any semblance of the capacity in which the people who were having me read that wanted me to. I didn't see what Hitler had wrote as some great epitome of racial superiority. I didn't see what Nietzsche was writing as some type of professing of superiority. And I actually kind of fell outside of good favor, in that I wouldn't accept those readings as the way that they wanted me to. And eventually I had to leave general population and go to what's called a sensitive needs yard. When I went to the sensitive needs yards, it was no better. And the sensitive need yards that I first went on to was affectionately known as Jurassic Park. And it wasn't because it was a bunch of old people or dinosaurs around the yard, but because it was a very savage place. And in the 6 years that I spent at that prison, I saw 4 murders and a couple of riots and more suicides than I even want to try to count. So it seemed like every day something was happening. like that. And I eventually turned to heroin as a coping mechanism and became addicted to drugs as a way of mentally escaping and numbing myself from the chaos and violence that was going around and the hopelessness that had kind of set into my own heart. And I spent some time in that kind of funk. And it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I had an encounter with one of my cellmates that almost acted like a mirror for me to see into my own life clearly. I saw that where I had been, I saw what I had become. And I was always reminded of those old early 90s, 80s commercials of the Dare commercials of somebody saying nobody ever said I wanted to be a junkie when I grew up. And it was a shock. It was a shock to me to see that and to have it pointed out to me and not being able to refute it because I knew it was the truth. And I decided that that's not who I wanted to be. That's certainly, I never wanted to be the bad guy in the story. And so I felt the need to make some changes in my life. I didn't have much direction at the time because I was surrounded by people who didn't have directions in their life. So the first thing that I did was I went to the chapel and I started going through various material that was available for free, including the Bible and the Quran, and even got involved for some time with Wicca and studied the occult. And I was kind of on that nature-based religion path when I went to Chuckawalla. This is getting later into my time. I went to Chuckawalla and I was asked if I wanted to attend a Buddhist service. And my first reaction was no, because I really didn't know anything about Buddhism at the time. And I think I had maybe read one or two things about the Four Noble Truths prior to really, and they were just like those general synopses that don't do any justice to them. So it didn't really stick at the time with me. And I initially declined the invitation, but the guy said, well, you know, if you come, you get have the opportunity to meet a real life Buddhist monk. And that was a selling point for me. I wanted to, I've seen plenty of Buddhist monks on TV and wouldn't mind going into the chapel to learn some Kung Fu. And so I went, and there was no Kung Fu, but I met Venerable Shinsong from International Bodhisattva Sangha, and I sat with him in the community, and he was giving a lesson on the Four Noble Truths and karma. And from the moment that I sat down and he began to speak, I was committed. He spoke eloquently, he spoke with confidence, and he kind of had me from the moment that I first heard his lessons. And of course, because of the character that I had developed over time, my first thing to do was try to poke holes in the Dharma and to see where it was wrong and see how it didn't match up and see why it wasn't right or didn't work for me. So I began to read. I began to read different literature from Thich Nhat Hanh and Jack Kornfield and Pema Chodron and everybody. I was just sponging it up, and I realized that the more that I read, the harder it was for me to even generate the motivation to try to poke holes in the Dharma. And the more that everything made sense to me, and the more that I was attracted to Buddhism. And eventually later that year, I took the 5 precepts in refuge under Venerable Shinsong. Buddhism offered me, for lack of a better term, it kind of smacked me into consciousness, really. It kind of smacked me awake, in that it put it put the responsibility of my life in my hands. And it wasn't God doing anything to me. It wasn't God punishing me. It wasn't a bad justice system. It wasn't all of these sort of archetypal excuses that inmates use inside that was responsible for the suffering that I had felt and the suffering that I had created, but rather it was my responsibility. And in a way that message was very liberating. It allowed me to see that I didn't have to be who I thought I was, that I was more than the worst mistake in my life, and that I had the ability to change and live whatever type of life I wanted, no matter where I was at. It taught me to accept the consequences of my actions and to understand that those things come out of my choices, and gave me an avenue to begin to change the way that I thought and the way that I treated other people and the decisions that I made. Not as an attempt to avoid negative consequences, but as the kind of awakening to the idea of a totality in suffering amongst everybody, all sentient beings. And when I stepped away, it is kind of counterintuitive as may seem. I was able to step away from myself once I started taking responsibility for myself. It created an ability for me to see other people, and it created an ability for me to see the interconnectedness that I had to everyone around me. And in doing the personal work that I was doing, I began to reflect on my youth and how I had not had anybody to turn to. And I didn't trust any of the people who were there that I might have been able to turn to. I didn't trust them. And I saw what kind of detriment that was to my life, holding that. And I formed the resolution to not be that person to other people, to not turn my back on other people, and to help everyone who asks for help and everybody who's seeking help. And this has included some people that I did not typically see eye to eye with in prison. The time came where they asked for help because they saw that I understood the board process, or I understood this, or I understood that, and I tried to do my best to touch non-Buddhist people in Buddhist ways. And as I become the chaplain's clerk in the prison, the Chakawala, I became a chaplain's clerk in my office. Had actually started to become a counselor's office, in which other people would come into my office to ask me for help or ask me for advice. All of the time, I tried my best to give good advice, to manifest skillful means in their life, and to say, I don't know if I didn't know, instead of making something up. Within the Buddhist community, I became the facilitator at the behest of the previous facilitator, as well as Venerable Shen Song. And though I didn't feel like I was Buddhist enough to be the facilitator for a Buddhist group, I have always relished the challenge, and I've always been good with leadership. Though at certain points in my life, it was very dormant. And I took it on because nobody else wanted to, and I felt that I could do it. And I took it on without the idea that I was going to go into Buddhist service and be some kind of Dharma teacher, only just to be responsible for the community and its things. And I spent 8 years in that position. And during that time, as a facilitator, as it paralleled my education in Buddhism and the development of my practice, there were some lively conversations. And I took very strongly to Nagarjuna and Kamala Shila and Santideva, and I read a lot of very Mahayana classical teachers, as well as other teachers who were from the Theravadan community as well, and the Zen community. And I developed kind of like a list of people that I preferred to read. And a lot of the conflict that would happen within the Buddhist community typically had to do with me being a know-it-all and somebody who was very academic, and the brothers in the Sangha who just wanted to sit and just wanted to practice. And one of the ones that I can highlight to you is we have a brother in that Sangha who was a Pure Land Buddhist, and he comes from a family of Pure Land Buddhists. And as somebody who really looked into reading sutras instead of just reading commentaries on them, I had developed a rather unique perspective on Pure Land Buddhism, and not in the negative at all, just a different perspective. And I tried to kind of point that out to him and try to sit with him and show him these things. And it was kind of like a constant, I've been a Buddhist my whole life and you can't tell me how to be a Buddhist now. And luckily we had people like Venerable D. Hung and Chris and some people, the other people from IBS who would come in and referee, but and we always accepted them as the final authority. Along with along with my development of Buddhism, I also got into self-help. I had several vices that I needed to address, and I had to start gaining insight into my life so that I could present it to the Board of Parole hearings when it was come time to find out whether or not I was going to be suitable. I ended up participating and facilitating most of the groups that that were there, that were offered, including Alternatives to Violence Project, the Victim Offender Education Group, AANA, Anger Management, Cage Your Rage. There was a lot of them, and I became kind of known amongst the administration as somebody to go to help organize for that. I also created some groups in prison. I created a group that was specifically tailored for people who were sex offenders and were looking to make the changes in their life that were necessary. And I created a group within our own Buddhist Sangha based on Kevin Griffith's books, his One Breath at a Time and the 12-step workbook. So I spent a lot of time in that arena, and doing that, my Buddhist practice it was very key. I was already practicing insight meditation, samadhi, and mindfulness practices, which only added to the sort of cognitive behavioral therapy that most self-help groups try to utilize. I've always joked with the guys that CBT and ACT was just Buddhism without Buddhism. So the time did eventually come that I sat in front of the Board of Parole hearings, and they said that I didn't need to be there anymore. They said that I had been rehabilitated, and they commended me for my efforts. And they put me through the 4-hour ringer. I mean, no part of your life goes unturned when you sit in front of people who are more likely to give you a denial than a grant. So, but at the end of it, it was very, very sweet to hear people who held my freedom and my physical freedom in their hands to give me those accolades. But a new problem began to arise for me in that, again, I didn't have much outside support, and I had absolutely no idea what it meant to be an adult in the world. But like everything else I had ever gone through in life, I just kind of did it. learned the things that I needed to learn. I struck up conversations with people, and I soaked in as much as I could before I got out. And the day came, and I walked out of the Chuckwalla Valley State Prison, and got on a bus and headed out to Los Angeles, a city that I've never been to before. Or I have been to, but I've never really explored before. I'm not from the LA area. And wound up in a bus station in the middle of downtown, not knowing that I was downtown and not really knowing what to do or where to go. I had one phone number to call, and that phone number luckily panned out and came pick me up. And I went to the Francisco Homes, which is a reentry program in LA, where it was during the COVID, so everything that I needed to do was made more complicated. I didn't even know my own social security number when I got out, so I had to get that, and I had to go through the stuff with getting IDs and birth certificates and social security cards and all of those things that I had absolutely no idea how to do. And nothing that I had done in prison had really prepared me for that. And I was also confronted with my own freedom. I didn't know, it had been so long, and the majority of my developmental years were in prison, that I didn't know what to do with myself. I would sit around the house not wanting to go outside. I would plan my day around count time, even though there was no count anymore. And it took some time, but I eventually, step at a time, went out. And during this time, I used my meditative practices, as well as all of the things that the great lessons of emptiness that Nagarjuna had taught me, to keep myself from emotionally or mentally collapsing under a very unknown foreign world. And I was with the program at Francisco Homes for about 1.5 years. And I met some guys there that had all done time together in San Quentin, and they had a band, and they kind of took me under their wing and taught me about paying my taxes, and taught me a lot of things about my responsibilities as an adult in society. I also did some guest speaking. I did some guest speaking with some of the self-help groups that I was taking inside. And in the course of that, I met some people who were interested in becoming self-help volunteers inside, and had actually wanted to strike up private conversations with me. So during the course of one of those, I had expressed the idea of coming up with a parolee resource organization that focused on DIY videos. I was struck when I got out by how many other men and women who come out of prison after a prolonged time had no idea what they were doing when it came to technology, using their phones, getting on the computer, and living in a world where that kind of knowledge and skill set is mandatory. And you come out of prison after 30 years old, or after 30 years, and you're 50, and 10-year-olds know more about using their phone than you do. So I wanted to do something to kind of help out that community, because I saw what kind of a struggle that was. And my idea was to create a YouTube channel. And I met people who the other co-founders of the Freedom Discovery Project, and that's a project that now we are working on. We're in production of some of the videos, and we have our website up, and we're generating resource lists. It's still very in the very early age, but it's a passion project that I'm committed to. And in that time, I was kind of compelled to learn video editing. And so my partners got me Adobe Premiere and an instructional course, and I was on my way to learn how to video edit for these DIY videos. And when I moved out of the program, I moved into I rented a room, and in that house were the 3 band members, and they wanted to use my skill set with videos to create videos for their band, to get them out. and to get them out there. They were trying to do something positive with their music, as well as how it ties into their time in prison. So I did some recording with my phone and put together a couple videos that we've posted for them. And I'd actually like, if it's possible, if we have the time, to show you one of the videos of those men and how they're tying in their prison experience as well as their music.
Music has been a passion since I was a wee lad. Ed Sullivan, 1963, Beatles. I said, I want to be like Ringo, I want to play drums. My parents finally, after much begging, bought me a drum set, and I played for many years. So it's been a passion of mine. I went to prison and found there was music in prison. And lo and behold, there was a drum set there, but didn't always have access to the drums. So I learned bass and learned to write, and was very passionate about audio recording and production and producing songs and music. So my former boss at San Quentin for 9 years, who's Father George Williams, who's up in San Francisco now, was kind enough and foresighted enough and allowed me to study audio engineering and do the engineering in the chapel for about 3 years. So it's been a very, very big part of my life, whether being a player or a producer or an engineer. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know what, I've always, even as a little kid, I've always been musically inclined. I come out of a very musical family. Well, I remember the songs that my sister was listening to, 1963, 1964. You know, I do, I remember that stuff. So. And my brother Robert was an inspiration. He liked a lot of the Merle Haggard stuff. And my family were all listened heavily to all kinds of music, right? So I got a little taste of everything.
Well, funny thing, when I was a little kid, I think I was about 8, my dad was in the car business, and he took a Hammond B3 organ in on trade for a car, and he brought it home and said, do you want to learn how to play this? And I said, well, sure. So, ever since then, I've been playing keyboards.
Music is my medicine. You know, I guess that might be the Native American part of me. You know, they say that music soothes the savage beast, right? Well, I was pretty crazy for 17 years when I was in prison. And getting to get back into my art, getting to get back into playing, getting to get back into different aspects, whether it was the music or it was Shakespeare in San Quentin or the music program in New Folsom, right? It gave me a safe place. It gave me a place where I could just be the better part of me.
Music for me has been a therapy my whole life. I used it to protect myself from my own negative emotions. If I was hung up on a problem or unhappy about something, I could spend a few hours playing keyboards and forget about it. Just relax, get my attitude fixed, and that allows me to have a more positive approach when I run into a problem. Take some time away, do a little bit of music, think about it. It's very conducive for me. Music helps me process. And when I went to prison, I was already a very shut down person, a very, very tight, couldn't communicate well with people. I mean, sure, on a day-to-day basis we can talk, but for me to express my emotions or to ask for help was next to impossible for me. The music program in prison allowed me to meet a lot of people that could use my help. So I started helping people with their music, started to run the music program at the institution that I was at, and helped build a sense of community with music. So it's powerful.
2 things got me through prison, or really were the biggest help in prison. And one of them was my faith and my spiritual path. And the other one was music, to be able to create, to be able to perform, to be able to be allowed to produce events for the guys on the yard. And really, that creative outlet is so important for me, and it's so important for the people still in prison, for the men and women in prison. So whoever listens to this, if you can affect arts in prison, do that, because it really helps people get through the toughest times, that artistic expression.
So that's the band. They are very committed to using their music and their stories to create a positive image and to give back. And I am proud to be able to help them with that. The ability to feel hope and compassion has been a cornerstone to the changes that I've made in my life, and I wouldn't have been able to come across that. I would have never been able to experience that had it not been for the people who brought the Dharma in and who sat with me, and for the outside volunteers who made me feel like a human being and made it okay for me to have those feelings. So I hope that what I've had to say and can act as something that encourages people who are interested in going in to help. It's not an easy task and it's time consuming, but had it not been for somebody or multiple people who are dedicated to facing the challenges that go along with that, I may very well still be in prison. So thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd like to introduce our other panelists. This is Baya Kira. She's a Buddhist chaplain in Canada, full-time employed Buddhist chaplain in Canada, which is something we don't have in the United States, or is extremely rare. And she's been gracious enough, and I'm grateful that she's returned to the Buddhist prison panel at this conference again.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and it's an honor to follow up after you, Anthony. Thank you for everything you shared. I guess I'll say a few things about me just so people know who I am. Yes, I live in Canada. I'm an American. I moved up here 27 years ago, and I've been a practicing Buddhist for over 25 years. I'm ordained as a Dharmacharya, which is a kind of a lay ordination. The community I'm part of is led by Venerable Panyawati, who's not a very well-known nun, but she's quite an impressive woman. I've been a chaplain now for almost 9 years. I also worked as a yoga trauma therapist in Vancouver for a decade before I went into prison work, and I specialized in somatic trauma recovery for street entrenched injection drug users. So I have been doing frontline work for a long time. I started my chaplaincy work at the hospital prison in British Columbia, where I worked for 6 years, and now I work at the maximum men's security prison. And I have a master's in Buddhism, and that's probably all the really interesting sort of facts. I don't even know if they're that interesting. So yeah, I work full time as a prison chaplain. So that means 40 hours a week in one prison, although I have at different periods in my employment been also hired to do Buddhist demographic hours. So in Canada, we have sort of a dual track of chaplaincy. There's a multi-faith position that's a full-time position at every prison, 1 or 2 chaplains at every prison, and you can be any religion and you have no religious no religious responsibilities. You're there to do administrative work, to do counseling, and to manage the chapel and make sure all the volunteer and chaplain-led programs are running. Help guys get their resource needs met, and a lot of counseling. So I mostly have done that, but I've also been the traveling Buddhist chaplain, which means I've worked at every level of security, from indigenous healing lodges up to maximum and segregation units, teaching Dhamma. And my background is as a Theravadan Buddhist. So mostly my day is, or my week is a split between paperwork, counseling work, and organizational stuff that might look like what a volunteer coordinator at a community center does. Making sure the venue is clean, making sure the chapel is ready for the next service. And that's my job. I don't know what might be interesting about that, because there's so many directions to go. I guess I can say that prison work has been, for me, the hardest thing I can imagine doing. I don't think I could have imagined how hard it would be, even though you would imagine something pretty awful. But prison is a very caustic place. Everyone who is touched by incarceration is burned by it. Whatever relationship you have, whether it's a loved one or yourself who's incarcerated, or you work there, or you're a family member to an employee or someone who's incarcerated, all of it. If prison touches your life, I believe it's damaging. I believe it's a damaging, spiritually damaging and psychologically damaging place. And I spend most of my time there, and I find, it's made me a very different person than I was before I started. In some ways stronger and better than I ever knew I would become. And in other ways, just different. It's a different place to be. It affects you very strongly. And so I am now about 2 years past almost a crisis point. Right about when COVID hit, I had quite a strong crisis of in my work, and I've been working very hard to try and create something from that. I feel like I came to Buddhism because, although I had been a religious person in my youth, I saw the emptiness of my beliefs, that underneath it all was just my interest in trying to have a parent figure in the sky bigger than my own family that could protect me. And that eventually led me to Buddhism. But I found that prison sort of had the same kind of disillusioning impact on my Buddhism, because there's so much about Buddhism that's so romantic, the way that it's portrayed, the way that it's sold, how we talk about it, how we talk about the good it brings into our life. Maybe not for everyone, but in my life and in my circle of friends, there's a lot of romanticism, and prison has really impacted me very strongly. And I am back to, after a couple years of a lot of different kinds of healing work, I'm back to feeling really happy to go to prison most days and happy to be there for the guys. They're my main group of people that I interact with on a daily basis are people who are incarcerated. And that means a lot of people with brain injuries, incredible number of trauma problems, ADHD, on the spectrum, survivors of all kinds of violence. Yeah. So I think that's what I've got, Chris. If you don't have anything else you'd like me to talk about.
No, thank you. So just like to open up the panel to the audience. If anyone has any reflections or questions for Anthony or Kira.
I guess I have one thing. I turned my air conditioner on. You can see my hair flying. Is it affecting the sound, or can you hear me? You
Can't hear it.
Okay. I guess just being aware of how totally imbalanced the society is to have mass incarceration, and so even though it's become normalized, it's something that never should have become normalized in the first place. And so even though there can be stories of incredible strength, and especially through using Buddhism to help you get through that, and like a crucible that makes a diamond out of a lump of coal. So in that sense, it's a very inspiring thing to hear your stories. But then at the same time, just being aware how messed up our society is that we have mass incarceration to begin with, and just feeling that we still need to have a huge transformation in society in general. But that somehow possibly the experiences that you've had, or the experiences that a number of us have had encountering the system and working in the system or outside of it, somehow like there seems to be a need for some kind of continuous thread from being within the experience to having a vision of how it could be different to lead out of the experience. So that's, I guess that's just one of my takeaways. Yeah, so I'll limit my comment to that for now.
Well, if I can jump in, something you may not know has happened in Canada is they've ended segregation in Canada. About a year and a half ago now, the Canadian federal government was ordered by the Supreme Court of Canada to end segregation and to replace it with something that was not torture. And they defined very clearly what not torture means. At minimum was 2 hours a day of meaningful human contact and 4 hours a day of time outside your cell. So over a year period, all the segregations in Canada were ended, and they tried to create something new. And why I bring that up is because, John, it relates to this idea of knowing that what we have is broken and envisioning where we can go. As long as we're using correctional staff to go where we're going to carry the impact of corrections as it was in the past into the future. One of the hardest dynamics I watch in my prisons, the warden at our prison decided that there was too much cruelty among the senior correctional officers. So she got rid of virtually everybody with more than 2 years correctional experience. So all our correctional officers at this maximum security are very young. And you watch them come in with a very street awareness of human beings as people. And you watch them struggle with the dynamics that they meet in their role. And then you watch them either get mentored by someone who's around who's still bitter, or just flailingly attempt to find their own way of being authority figures based on their own, mostly parents, how their parents in school taught them. And then you realize that if we're going to use the same people we've got to do the next thing, we're just going to get the same thing we already have. Because in a little while, you see all these young folks who just settle into a low common denominator of venting, resisting passively what they don't want to do by just refusing to really show up when they're at work. And then exploring what it means to be able to bully and dominate people without consequence. And that, people just don't become wise through that freedom. of being able to bully without consequence. So even when we have something now replacing segregation, which is so much more humane, really the best part of maximum security prison is now this special interventions unit, because there's movies and get your own TV, and there's a whole bunch of things you don't normally get provided to you by the government. Even if everything changed, even if you got the staff changed, the fellows who are incarcerated still are carrying the memories and the traumas of what they went through in the past system. And so you just can't escape it until there can be, I think, an actual holistic approach to the legislation changes while the staff are being mentored and they're going to therapy, and all the guys who are incarcerated are also getting therapeutic support and better diets and meaningful jobs. There's just no way that we're going to take what we've got and turn it into something that's not a version of what we got. That's my 2 cents.
If I can add to that, I think Kiara hit everything hit every nail there was to be hit right on the head. So I think it was in like when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California, he changed the designation of the Corrections Department from California Department of Corrections to California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations. And so adding that rehabilitations, and then part of that, his goal was to start forcing the union to push out the older, longer senior guards, and a lot of them did. A lot of them were pushed into retirement, and a lot of them, but not enough. The thing about it, and the guards went through their sensitivity training, and that becomes a joke, and that occupation is an occupation where you're put into a position where you have that much control over another human being is susceptible almost without fail to corruption, and not only just corruption like as in the rules and the law, but corruption of the human spirit. I don't think that people were ever whether you're a believer in God or karma, I don't believe that people were ever meant to have that much control over other people. But the thing with California and the legislation here in the state is that in the vast majority of our country really is that everything is too black and white. It's one way or the other. It's red or blue, or it's tough on crime or soft on crime, or tough on immigration or soft on immigration, and nobody ever wants to find a midpoint. And in California, they've kind of worked themselves into a corner with regards to the justice system and the corrections system, in that they have at one time 36 prisons that were 160% over capacity. So these were one-man cells that had 3 men in it, and they had to put beds into the recreation area that were triple tiered, and it was just lock them up, throw away the key politics, and when you go into the system, there's no mandatory reform. You can do what you want as in California. You can sit around, play pinochle all day. You can go out and play basketball all day. You can work out all day. You go do your not everybody is assigned to a job, and not everybody. Some people get into vocations, and then these vocations are teaching trades with material and machinery that's 15 years out of date, and you have people who have learning disabilities, who are trying to go into school to learn their GED from teachers who don't have the patience to teach people with learning disabilities, and they're not there. That was one of the most shocking things that I saw amongst, when you talk about the transformation of people who go to work in prison, are people who take up professions that are dedicated to helping people quickly evaporating into being another cog in the machine, and being proud of it. And there was a teacher I remember who loved giving write-ups to people. And she really liked to give write-ups to guys that have life sentences because that's who is affected the most by those write-ups. Those write-ups can extend your time in prison from 3 years to 15 years, depending on the write-up. So, which is the kind of stuff that communist China was doing to political prisoners of Tibet. They, if you do something in prison, you get a tattoo. It's like getting another 3-year prison sentence. So they also foster in the system here in California to gangs. As much as they preach that they don't, they do, because that's who has favoritism. They're responsible for they're more responsible for a lot of the violence that goes on within the system that they're willing to admit. And that's recorded history. The Corcoran Shoe gladiator fights in the 90s that pulled in the FBI had to create an oversight at that prison and go in and investigate guards setting up fights within the security housing units.
We actually just had the deputy warden of Edmonton Max 2 years ago got fired for being part of a fight ring.
Yeah. And the biggest thing that I think one of the biggest things within the legislation and the people who are that are above these systems is that, one, they're told what to do by the prison unions, which I don't know how they are in Canada, but in California, the people who are part of the unions are probably just as powerful as the Teamsters. And they either don't push healthy legislation that can correct the system, or they kind of do the slingshots the other way, where they're just letting people go. And as many of my friends that are still in there, I'd like to see go. Not everybody in prison is ready to get out. They need to. There's people, because I think of myself as a citizen, and I think of people in there that are not ready to take the responsibility that is required to be successful out here. And it's unfortunate. And I think the most unfortunate part about it is that learning those responsibilities is not mandated by the system which they're put into. It's quite literally just a warehouse now. And the response to the overcrowding is to let people go. And that's great. But we've done nothing to prepare the people that we're letting go to get out. And not everybody and that's why California justice correction system has one of the highest recidivism rates in the country. And there's no mandatory self-help groups. They don't pay, they don't have like the best psychologists. And in some prisons, psychologists are not allowed to do talk therapy. They're only there to determine whether or not somebody needs to be put onto medication. And which is another huge problem within the system, is that there's no differentiation between the mentally ill and people who commit crime because of other reasons. So the prisons are just as full of people who are talking to themselves and hearing voices, and it's sad, and it's just too black or white. There's no gray area. There's no real interest in creating a system that works. It's too profitable the way it is now.
May I jump in, Anthony? One thing I've reflected on is that if we really wanted to make the biggest impact on prison reform in real life with the people we've got and the budgets we've got, it would be a concerted effort to do some kind of moral and psychological training with guards. Guards are the people who form the structure that holds the attitude. If you got the wrong guards, you get a really bad attitude in a prison. Things go really downhill. When I think about when people talk about, helping, and I think about how would it even come off in my Buddhist world if I said, I'm going to stop helping inmates, I'm going to start helping guards. Now, there's this sense we have that prison is immoral and abuses of power are also immoral. So people who have the authority to use force and abuse force and incarcerate, so officers, guards, they have a stink of immorality on them. But really, what would be the best thing is if all the best people that we know became prison guards. If the most mature, the wisest, the most patient, self-regulated, insightful, skillful people became employees of prisons. And I think about that. I think about how our modern Buddhist teaching in the community is so focused on moving towards a feeling of ease, comfort, safety, and fairness on the way to enlightenment, none of which I have a problem with, but how if only somehow we had Buddhist teachings relating to how do you control someone skillfully? Is that a thing? Is that a thing? I don't know if it's a thing. How do you do a takedown on someone while then follow up with an apology and accountability? How do you do any of these things in a different way? And I don't know, because if we can't use force in an ethical way, if there's actually no philosophical way to do skillful incarceration, then we should stop talking about reform and just really start talking about basic, corruption and abuse, because prisons are corrupt, abusive places that take advantage of the people who are there in so many ways. Staff and inmates are all taken advantage of. It's tough for me when we talk about Buddhism in prison, because I feel like where Buddhism really could be showing its chops, it would need to be so much tougher and so much more direct and realistic in the way it's being presented. And the skills we're trying to build. I mean, learning how to say no to someone else skillfully is as useful inwardly as outwardly to say no to yourself skillfully. So super great. Being able to motivate someone without violence, super important inwardly and outwardly. We're always just sort of focusing on small ways, and we don't really look at how do you get out of a violent situation with mindfulness? How do you deal with someone spitting on you and calling you names, whoever's doing it to whom? It happens in prison all the time. How do you deal with threats of being stabbed or raped compassionately? Like, how do we even deal with this? If we really think Buddhism is useful everywhere and available everywhere, then we can explore this without betraying the spirit of Dhamma. But yet we still don't enough for my.
I've never been of the mindset
Ella?
that Buddhism can't be those things. Are we almost out of time?
I think someone.
No, go ahead. Ella was raising her hand, so.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I don't think that Buddhism. I think that Buddhism can be that. I think that it can be direct, because that's pretty. And I think that because of how I carry myself. I've never been one of those people who have bought into the idea that Buddhism means that I'm a doormat. But it also doesn't mean that I have the right to be a bully either. And finding a skillful balance between being assertive in the way that I carry myself as well as compassionate has been something that I have been able to capture, though probably still necessary to be continued to be honed. But one of the big injustices is that image that Buddhism has, where that means that it's very, I think, too commonly seen as very hippie-ish and love everybody and it's whatever and everything's empty, just let it go, and that's not, in my opinion, is not the correct view of Buddhism, and it's not the correct. Some people may be like that, and that's fine. But I think that there are people who are Buddhists who can be direct. Unfortunately, they're superseded by the tender, loving, mushy, fun to listen to, skillful Buddhists. But I mean, I personally, I don't fit into that category. I'm not a very mushy Because in part because you can't afford to be that way as an inmate. You really can't. So if you want to practice Buddhism in prison, and you're genuinely dedicated to it, people will take advantage. And so there's still a part of you that has to be willing to be assertive and stand up for yourself, just not resort to violence, but to be skillful with your conflict resolutions, and to kind of carry yourself in the air with an air that, hey, I'm a Buddhist, but I'm not a doormat, and I'll help you, but you're not going to take advantage of me. And I'll listen to you, but I'm not going to allow you to put me down, or, you know what I mean? I do think that one of the issues is that there's just that perception of Buddhism being lovey-dovey, and I don't think that that's necessarily how it has to be practiced.
Ella, did you want to say something?
First of all, I want to thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I want to thank you, both the panelists, so much for sharing. It's so gripping. It's like listening to someone explaining how they walk to hell and also how they walk back out. It's like a miracle. It's so incredibly inspirational, and I know it's not all. Yeah, there's nothing fluffy about it, but I just want to thank you for sharing so intimately about what you're going through, both. And yeah, the question I want to ask is if you happen to know the movie Doing Vipassana. It's documentary that was taken at prisons in India that was such a remarkable person in charge decided to allow Vipassana courses being held in the prison system. And I'm not a person who will watch anything twice. Like, life is too short to watch anything twice. But that film I have watched already a few times because it's just I love sharing it. It's for me such a breakthrough, like almost the only imaginable breakthrough, because these courses are held in noble silence. So all the friction that occurs through communication with words is basically cut out from the get-go. It's a 10-day course. You cannot speak, you cannot do anything but meditate. And it leads people so straight towards the recognition of not being the victim of the system, which you found for yourself too, Anthony. But you know, there's such an like shortcut access to that, and it is so tremendously freeing. I know that I totally get the paradox about it, that you go like, how can it be freeing if I'm responsible for this incredible mess? So much easier to blame others. But no, in the end, it's the only thing that can set you free, is to say, okay, somehow, maybe I can't figure out how, but somehow I got myself here. And I also have the power to turn my life around, no matter in which situation I'm in. I've thought so many times of, you know, the empowerment that I feel I hold in my hand by the simple fact that I could spend endless times without company. Like, take me away from people. If you let me meditate, I'm fine. You know, just that, this incredible independence, this empowerment that I can go somewhere if I'm undisturbed, which you're often not in a prison. But I just wonder, is that something that could possibly be working in Canada, Or maybe you haven't seen the movie.
You froze right there at the end, but I think you were asking if this could be something that would happen in a Canadian prison. We one temple got, after 2 years of work, to the final stage of getting everything signed off, and the warden kiboshed it. The truth is that because it requires officers to meditate with the inmates, and they all have to stay sleeping in the gym for 10 days. There's just not enough space resources to provide, and there's not enough staffing resources to provide, let alone the disinterest in the whole project. So I know, yes, one temple tried, they got the closest anyone's ever gotten in Canada, and they made it 95% of the way and just didn't get the warden signature. But they still come in once a week, the volunteer group from that temple, and they lead 2 hours of guided meditation in the chapel. And they do day-longs 10 times a year. And when I was a Buddhist chaplain, I was doing day-longs at all the mediums and minimums, 4 times a year at every prison. So sometimes smaller projects are totally doable. It just depends on who's the warden and who's the staff at the time. But multi-day projects are hard.
Corey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to first share my appreciation, Tony, for your share, and then of course Abayakira, so who's an old Dharma sister. You know, I probably have the least amount of prison experience of us here. Just in turn, you know, I worked at CCI Tehachapi for about a year, going up regularly, actually with Gary Sanders, who was with us earlier today, and you know, my experience was that the COs, the correctional officers, the guards were by far the worst part of the experience. The amount of power that they had and the amount of sadism that they exhibited was profound. And these were people who were clearly very ill. There was an immense amount of mental illness being exhibited by the people who are managing the facility. Just outstanding amount of suffering. And, you know, also within the context of America, and I certainly cannot speak for Canada, but I know that within the context of America, the prison guard unions are very strong. They're very conservative. They involve a lot of people coming from military backgrounds. They're pretty right wing. And they were openly hostile to the notion of Buddhists coming into the prison. And I'm not sure where the laws stand these days, but we don't really have much of a footing in the prison system. Buddhist prisoners haven't been historically, it's not a recognized faith. And so we exist within that system by the generosity of other ministers or chaplains who host us typically. And I don't know if that's changed, but I was certainly made aware of that repeatedly, you know, that I was a guest of a Christian minister, and that if I did anything to push too far, that invitation would be immediately revoked. I do really appreciate something that I'm hearing in this conversation, which is that, you know, in many ways, the prison ministry work that we're doing, while it's profound and powerful and life-changing, and I certainly experienced it that way. The guys that I worked with, the 4 Seasons Sangha at Tehachapi, were some of the most dedicated students I've ever practiced with. and the most grateful students I've ever practiced with. But at the same time, it's like we are, the proverbial, the Dutch boy with his finger in the leaky dike, if you will, and that is that we, it's so little in a system that is so, everything from DA's offices, and the need for reform within police and attorneys' district attorneys' relationship, the private prison industry, the need for reform there, the need for reform in the guards unions, and the flow of money between prison unions and politicians. The fact, as Anthony points out, there's no rehabilitation in California prisons at all. There's no rehabilitation. As Buddhists, the question becomes, what can we really do? What can we do that's really of the maximum service? And it seems like the real need is a very profound political push. I don't know what kind of allies we have. The Christian right has been pushing for more incarceration, more, there's a very corporal sort of attitude. And so within the religious world, the spiritual world, the question becomes, who are our allies? How can we gain numbers, and what can we do to sort of confront this? And I also appreciate this idea of, if we continue to foster a form of Buddhism that is a sort of fluffy self-help, middle-class white Buddhism, then
the upper middle way.
The upper middle way, then we are, it's sort of a snowflake Buddhism. It melts away when confronted with hardship very, very rapidly. And as somebody coming from a background that sounds somewhat similar to yours, Anthony, I've struggled with my relationship with Buddhism on and off over the years. Where is a Buddhism that addresses childhood rape? Where is the Buddhism that addresses attempted murder by your own family members? Where is the Buddhism that addresses the trauma and the anger and the rage that sort of come out of that? And I know that it exists in the historical context. I know that Buddhism, the historical Buddhism, does address these things. It's right there in the text. We have murderers, we have people who have suffered immensely find relief in the Dhamma, but that's not the Dhamma that's been popularized in the West. And that's another area where I think there's a calling for us to really sort of confront that form of Dhamma. So it's a lot of food for thought, and I really appreciate it. But I really feel it's the call. I thought if I sitting in on this, the call would be for me to sort of like feel the need to get back into doing some prison teaching, and that really what I feel like the call is for me to engage Buddhist communities in pushing for prison reform as much as we can. And I know that that's like a mountain. We're talking about moving one pebble at a time. But if we're not doing it in a very loud and vocal and active way, it grinds people down. Going in there and doing this work with all the best intentions, with all of the greatest practice you have, it'll eat you up and spit you out. And we've all seen that, I think. And the only way we're going to change that is if we reform the beast. So just the thoughts, but I really appreciate this conversation.
I do think there are some things that are in a general Buddhist practitioner that can achieve those goals, and a lot of that has to do with the way that they see their practice, and that the way that the kind of goal that they are setting with their practice, and I think that I don't know how to vocalize people that are Buddhists, but I do know that there are plenty of things and practices and mantras and sutras that are in the Buddha, that are within the Buddhist spectrum, that can offer a sense of fearlessness and courage, and to be vocal and to make changes in a place where change is not popular, whether you're a guard or an inmate or an outside person looking at the justice system. It takes courage and it takes fearlessness, because that's going to be met with opposition. And I think this is kind of referring a little bit to what Yara was saying earlier about how can Buddhism work in this arena. But there's a lot of everybody's practice doesn't have to automatically go to or exclusively be geared towards enlightenment. It can be each step and each gradual change that takes hold in people's life can mean it's something different in the way that they carry themselves in our conventional reality, in becoming fearless through the understanding of emptiness, and becoming fearless in the understanding of ourselves, and the ability to have compassion when nobody else wants to have compassion, are all positive attributes that can be kind of given to people without them being given to other people and other organizations and other settings without them knowing. That's kind of why I said during my presentation that I would reach out and touch people and non-Buddhists who I would touch them in Buddhist ways, and that's what I mean is like taking all of those things that I gained and using what action I could bring up out of it to help other people. But there's a lot of great stuff within the Dharma that teaches fearlessness. It just has to be presented that way by our teachers.
I know that we're almost done, but I have a couple points to what you were saying, Corey. One of the things that we're encouraged to do in the Pali Suttas is to become connoisseurs of pain, to become skilled with pain, understand pain. And if you look at how we train in that, I think there's lots of areas and ways that we could explore in the Dhamma world, not looking for how to turn pain into relief, but looking at what are the skills of being with pain, of seeing it in others, of holding it well, of respecting people who cause it. That's a wild one, of not because they cause it or don't, but because we offer respect and love. That's what we do. Learning how to hold the contradiction and even sometimes the cognitive dissonance of feeling closely to people who've been perpetrators of great violence and harm, who may, even as you are working with them as a chaplain, continue to do violence and harm to others. So there's that whole part of Dhamma, which is really, unfortunately, it's sort of skillful masochism, it looks like sometimes to people who watch me. I don't know. So maybe I'm not doing it right. Another thing I think Buddhists could really explore, Western Buddhists as we're trying to understand how to have a full Buddhism here, is the Patimoksha ceremony, Patimokkha in Pali. The monthly forgiveness ritual of Buddhism is the only orthodoxy that we have outside of view. If you study historically how religions are structured, Buddhism doesn't require that we all have the same beliefs. It requires we have the same ethics. And it specifically requires that we have the same ritual around restoring our ethics. And that was all of early Buddhism's sort of major issue, is we must all do Patimokkha the same way. We must have a harmonious Patimokkha. Our accountability and returning to balance efforts must harmonize with each other across our communities. And I don't think that's hardly anything that's been explored in Western white Buddhism is Patimokkha and what that could offer us. We should be the most skilled people in the room with that kind of transformative justice kind of work. We should be so skilled that we have 100 books, each of us, in our bookshelves about how to do this. And most people I know have never done a Patimokkha ceremony or group. So that would be two things I'd say, is to really start looking at what does it mean to know and appreciate the lessons of pain without seeking for relief, but not without hurting yourself as well, becoming masochistic. How to do Patimokkha, and then I think there really is a good example to go to Christian volunteers sometimes. There's a program in Canada called M2W2 that's like Big Brothers Big Sisters for inmates, and old Mennonite couples will get partnered with a guy who's in for life, double murder, and they'll just spend 30 years being his friend. They'll visit him every week. They follow him from prison to prison. They love him. They give him Christmas presents and birthday presents if they can. And they never try to make him Christian. They just walk with him. And it is the most amazing group. And if Buddhists want to know what they should do, they should start a Big Brother, Big Sister program in every prison, where all you're doing is just being a sound, sane, loving, accountable person in someone's life, to remind them that they're human and that they too can be sound and sane and accountable and live. Because otherwise, folks in prison are just abandoned and lost while they live. And it's, Buddhists should never ask, what can we do? That's what you can do. Go be a volunteer.
Thank you. Our panel's out of time unless there's one final thought from anyone. Well, beautiful points. A lot to think about. I'm very grateful to everyone who's here today and right now. Thank you all. Thank you all. And I hope to see you back tomorrow for our panels tomorrow. What's on the agenda tomorrow, John?
Let's see. Let me look at my handy dandy schedule. Okay, at 9 a.m. we have another round of yoga from 9 to 9:45, led by Dustin. Then from 10 to 12, we have an anti-war peace education panel, and that'll be facilitated by Lourdes. From 12:30 to 2, we have a panel on psychedelics ministry. And then from 2 to 3:30, we have end of life ministry. And then 3:30, we have another half-hour yoga practice. And then 4 to 5:30, we have the Buddhist chaplaincy panel that Nathan will be conducting. So that's our schedule for tomorrow.
Wonderful. Kira, thank you again. Anthony, thank you, both of you. Wonderful.
All right, I'll hit the stop recording here. Yeah, and I hope, as usual, this is just the beginning of us to keep connecting with each other. As Corey and Chris knows, I have lots of ideas about comic books and movies that involve various characters, human and non-human. And so there's definitely a prison genre that I have in my store consciousness that keeps coming up. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there that I think we have the makings for at least some good comic books, if nothing else. Okay, so have a good evening, everybody. And we will see you all. Hopefully we'll see most of you tomorrow.
Good night. Thank you.